to this meeting of the Milton Planning Board. This is our fourth meeting of the fiscal year 2018. I'm Alex Whiteside, the chairman. And why don't we go around the table and have people introduce themselves?
Brian Furs, member.
Julia Gedman, Laura Massey, assistant town planner.
William Clark, planning director.
Denny Swenson, member.
All right, we will defer consideration of the minutes until next meeting, which will be on September 14th. We're going to meet after that again on the 28th. We're now going to do citizen speak. We've got a number of things that we don't want citizens to speak on at citizen speak, and one is the subdivision at 1065 Brush Hill Road. Another is the Brushwood condominiums, and the other is the Pulte development at the town farm. But if there is any citizen who would like to speak on something else, we would welcome you at this time.
Okay. Coming up? Yep. It's a good, right here? Yep. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I just wanted to, I was asked, hello, my name is Quincy Miller from 3 Beechwood Lane, which is the Barna Estates development. Well, that was a subdivision that was completed, well, mostly complete. I guess the road was just finalized earlier this spring. I was asked to come and share a little background about a problem that we're having up there. And what it is when that development was approved, I think by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission, what have you, there were 2 large trees that were asked to be preserved. One was a European copper beech tree, and the other was a very large sugar maple. And I'm the owner of 3 Beechwood Lane. The large copper beech tree actually sits in the common area, and the sugar maple sits on my development. I had reached out to Bill Clark, I think originally via email, and my wife had actually asking for some advice because we had to ask an arborist to come out and take a look at the tree, particularly the beech tree, because there was one large section of that tree that did not bloom this year. And that arborist was Arbor Tree Care. I was trying to find someone local that served Milton. And when they came out, we thought maybe they had to have a piece of the trunk cut down. And if you don't know this tree, I'm not sure if the planning board knows this tree. It's a 7-foot trunk wide. I mean, it's the size of...
I mean, this is why the development is named what
Beechwood Lane.
what it's for. We are going to actually, we've seen the arborist report.
Did your arborist go out and take a
well,
look?
your arborist.
Oh, yeah,
yes.
they've sent mine in.
We've
Okay.
seen your arborist report, and we're going to consider this matter on the 14th of September.
Okay.
And it's going to be a regularly scheduled item, and hopefully we'll hear from your arborist.
Okay. So you would request us to bring, the reason where we reached out for was to get a second opinion. We were hoping the town had someone that you could recommend. The concern that we have was, again, I'm not an arborist. We unfortunately were told that these trees are dead and are going to require to be removed, which was completely disheartening for the entire neighborhood. We were told that the trees should have had, from this arborist, they should have had fencing around the drip line, which was, nothing was ever done, it was never special. So the request that we really had was not to come to get permission to cut down the tree. The original request was to see if you had a recommendation for a second opinion to find out if the trees can be saved. And I'm hoping I don't have to wait till September 14th to find out if you have a recommendation of someone to talk to.
Well, I've been impressed. Yes?
And I asked the guy that you're going to ask to go look at the tree and let me know tomorrow. He's either going to do it tomorrow or Monday.
All right. This is Mr. Hunt,
Mr. Hunt.
Mr. Douglas Hunt.
I actually saw him coming in the door. I had already talked to him yesterday. I saw him coming in the door and he said, no, I didn't know it was in a hurry, so he didn't do it. He goes, I'll do it tomorrow or Monday. He'll let me know Monday.
All right, and we're going to anticipate, we're going to get that report, we're going to have it on the 14th.
I'll make
Well,
every
well,
attempt to be here
he'll
or
be-
someone else from the
He'll
development.
be we'll share his views with you,
Thank you.
but we don't want you doing anything with the tree.
But that, again, that's why we reached out to you directly versus doing anything, because we are trying to save the trees.
Right.
Because
And we
losing those
think- And we
trees,
think that
be bad.
that developer should pay for it.
someone should be held accountable for not following the requirements of the planning board and conservation. That is true. But that's here, we'll cross that bridge, I
All right.
guess, when we get to it.
Now, yes,
Okay. You keep saying conservation.
Well, I'm
know
not sure
that.
the
I know.
logistics.
There is no conservation requirement. They have no jurisdictional area in that
Okay, so
there.
it's,
So they didn't do it. When it was developed, that actually is where the people who used to live there parked anyways, was under that tree.
well, we're going to
But Doug, I didn't ask Doug to go and give me a report as much as give me a drive-by and tell me what it is.
Well,
I didn't ask him to give me.
admittedly, giving a report, someone would have to pay. But
you go.
let's just get a off-the-cuff opinion,
And that's, we can make a decision from that.
and we'll go from there.
Right.
okay.
Because, of course, paying arborists is important, as the next item of business will show.
And part of the issue here is Mr. Hunt was the arborist for that development when it started, only the developer never paid him, so he never went back and finished and never told him which pieces to cut.
Maybe the developer should pay him.
Maybe he should.
All right.
Okay,
So we've got a lot of stuff to discuss on the 14th, but thanks for coming in and flagging that issue, and we'll give it a thorough. I'm pleased that you want to save the tree. That you didn't come in here with your chainsaw just saying.
no, not at all.
All right.
Unfortunately, we picked that lot for a reason. So, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you for squeezing me in.
Woodmere. We're going to do Woodmere. You're the arborist.
No, not
Landscape
an
arborist.
arborist.
You're
I'm a
the-
landscape architect.
Oh.
Right. I'm Alan Ackerman. I'm with Ryan Associates Landscape Architecture and Planning. We represent Northland Residential. And this is regarding Woodmere.
How many dead trees are there? There are 7, aren't there?
I think that's the number, yeah.
They're flagged with
They're flagged.
yellow ribbons.
Correct. So back in June, we provided you a letter as part of our regular updates on the development and our progress with the landscaping and site work. And along with that, highlighting some trees that have that died, that did not leaf out this spring. And along with a plan history and some, reviving the conversations we had together back in, 2014 or so, when we were planning the project. And, because I know a lot of the board members have changed since then, so we had a lot of conversations at that time. So Jack asked me to prepare a letter back in this spring, is submitted to you in June with those plans. And Jack and I spoke with you at your June meeting. I think that was about 2 months ago, 2 full months ago. And then subsequent to that, I think most of you have had a chance to come through the site, to visit it again. And so I'm here tonight to follow up on that if there are any questions.
You want to take down 7 trees, and you've prepared a supplemental landscaping plan, which will partially compensate for the trees you take down.
Correct.
Although the trees, as I see them, are outside of the construction site, and I don't think we can attribute their demise to construction.
Right. Last year, with the drought, with, site disturbance generally in the area, trees on Northland's property weren't the only ones to die in the area, trees across, up and down Brush Hill. So it was a rough year. So I think you're correct.
So has the board looked at the trees? The dead ones?
They look dead.
you agree they look dead, Denny?
I do agree they look dead.
April?
I did notice after Cheryl mentioned that there was some construction equipment in the drip line. And
That was near the Dupee house, if I remember those.
yeah, I mean, I could
referring
show
to
you
the
the
same
picture.
photos.
Yeah.
I've seen those photos, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
And the pile, that really high pile of dirt.
Sure.
Okay, so I just wanted you to be aware that.
Is that up in I hadn't get through to this week. Is it still there? Did anybody drive through, do you know?
Right. I think the photos, we always like to keep activity as far back from any trees as possible. Those piles and those activities, it's deceiving, it's a tight site, and most of that activity is within the footprint of buildings that will be built. So, I mean, that's how tight we are to some of these trees. So, Alex, you'll remember the discussion and how a lot of these trees came to be saved through the encouragement of the board. And, back when we were permitting the project, we were concerned about, accessing for construction and grade changes and all the rest with all of these trees. So that's why we have the replacement guidelines and agreements that we have with you, and why we come to you when we do have to take them down and replace them according to the formula that we worked out together.
And I do want to thank you for being proactive and coming to us and letting us know. And I do know there's a drought last summer.
Sure.
And
I just have one comment about the materials under the trees, though. Thank you, Denny.
yeah.
I appreciate it's a tight site, and you're at the back end of several meetings of very difficult situations with developers. So some of this comment will be based on that.
Sure.
But tight site or not, we need to follow the requirements of the special permit. I know there was an email from Mr. Dolly acknowledging that there were some issues on site, and I know Mr. Dolly's not here tonight, but in his email he said something to the effect of he would normally expect to hear about such issues from ISD, and I guess my only comment is I hope that he's not waiting for a specific notice from ISD to take steps to correct those issues on site. So
Was that Jack's comment in the email, or was that somebody outside?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not. This
Okay.
is not a critical comment
Okay.
as much as it's. Please don't wait for ISD to reach out.
Sure.
The planning board has reached out and asked for the items to be removed, so hopefully they will be removed.
Okay.
People have looked at the plan that they proposed.
Yeah.
Any revisions, suggestions, comments?
I mean, obviously, I'm fine with taking away the dead trees. And I don't have any. Seems that the replacement trees a lot of them are native.
They all were on the list. I checked the one that they was attached from Boston. I think it was that our list?
That's the one we had when this
Our-
was being
yeah,
developed.
okay.
We now have a different one, but
Okay,
for the development of this,
Okay.
we gave them that list.
great. Okay. All right. We need a motion?
Okay, we would consider this a insubstantial amendment to the permit because the trees are so clearly dead. If they had shown a spark of life, we would have taken a different approach. So I will entertain a motion for approval of this insubstantial amendment to site plan approval.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Is it insubstantial modification to the special permit and site plan approval? It was one document.
Yes. It's one document.
Well, it is one document, but there are two different, well, okay, we will entertain a motion to do an insubstantial amendment to the special permit and site plan approval.
So moved.
Okay, we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we've done it without getting into a big legal discussion.
Well done, everyone.
All right, now, we're going to do a hearing on a preliminary subdivision plan for 1065 Brush Hill Road. And the purpose of a preliminary plan is to find out what people think about the plan and whether or not they have thoughts on how the plan might be made better. There undoubtedly are a lot of people, or there are undoubtedly some people who oppose this plan, but just getting a statement of opposition probably would not be as helpful as getting a thoughtful comment on the plan and how it could be made reasonably acceptable to the neighborhood. And at some point, there will be a definitive subdivision plan submitted. And that definitive plan will be the plan which determines whether or not the roadway will be built and the subdivision allowed. What we want to get here is a idea of what people think about the proposed plan, how people think the proposed plan should be changed, whether or not people think that the second street on the other side of the site should be improved, that sort of thing. At some point, people can say, well, we've seen the definitive plan. I mean, the definitive plan will be developed partially as a result of what the input is here tonight and, of course, what the board recommends. The board eventually, after hearing from people, can either recommend an outcome or it can not recommend an outcome and just say, go ahead with your definitive plan. But if it recommends something, it basically would want to recommend something that the neighbors support. The board would be hesitant to go and recommend something that the neighbors don't support. But when it comes time for considering the definitive plan, the board is going to have to make a decision. And we hope that the information we get here tonight will help us make a good decision. So, with that said, Mr. Corcoran, why don't you introduce the matter?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ned Corcoran here on behalf of Juliet Turner and her sons, who are the owners of the property at 1065 Brush Hill Road. I'm joined by Claudio Sola, who is an engineer with the firm of DeSalle and Burke, which has prepared the very preliminary subdivision plan. I suppose we could label that very preliminary plan. There are obviously questions and issues to be raised and addressed by the board and by others with respect to some geometric and other issues about the plan and how the roadway might be improved. I think at the end of the day, like potential subdivision on Avenue A, subdivision here, and in others, we're looking at old lanes, existing roadways that today would not be allowable. They're not safe. They don't provide proper access for emergency and other vehicles. They don't provide passing area for vehicles, and there are a number of issues associated with it. And so there are a number of ways we think that this plan improves conditions out there. There are ways that we can go one way or the other to further improve. And so obviously feedback from the board as to how to go on that is important. We have not specifically designed the stormwater system, for example, because the grades, the issue of the grades and how the grades should be adjusted, whether and how they should be adjusted is important, so that you're properly designing a stormwater management system that addresses those issues. Currently, there's no stormwater management at all in the lane, and the water sheets down from the hill, from the peak of the roadway down towards Brush Hill Road. So what we've done, essentially, and maybe, Bill, you can go to the so that plan, so why don't I take, and you can, Claudia, you look at that. Basically, we're taking a roadway, the width of Upper Way, as it's known, on a series of plans that were developed over time prior to zoning, is 40 feet. And that 40 feet width is from, at this point, from Brush Hill Road into this point. This is approximately 574 feet from Brush Hill Road to this point. And then it narrows to 20 feet in this direction and then 16 feet off in this direction. And there are 4 properties that use this as their primary access to and from Brush Hill Road. The paved way itself is 11 to 12 feet wide enough for one vehicle. And Ms. Turner and her family own the entire frontage of the way from here to here and propose to build, if we go to the next, propose to widen the pavement to 18 feet in consultation with the fire chief, bring a 20-foot wide shared driveway in with adequate turning radius for fire apparatus if they need to come down the lane, back and out, or in and back and out. That's wide enough to handle all of the town's fire apparatus. And then there would be driveways off to 2 new lots. The road rises at a significant pitch from here up to roughly here, and then essentially levels. We've chosen a level area to create that turn, and it's really at the midpoint of the bulk of 2 lots. Turners own this neck of property, and as I said, this is the right-of-way itself is 40 feet in width. There are different ideas as to how you could level this. You could certainly drop the pitch, put in retaining walls, build retaining walls out to handle the drop in the pitch, any storm water systems that would need to go in. That's doable. That's on the table if necessary. It would really change the character with respect to introducing walls along what is now a fairly rural-looking lane, and we'd propose not to do that. But if that's necessary, we can do that, and we can design the stormwater management system to address that. If not, if the preference is to retain some level of that pitch, we can consider whether there should be a flat area here before you intersect with Brush Hill Road, and then some adjustment. But that's a question, that's a preference question, I think, for the board and others as to what extent, if at all, the pitch ought to be adjusted. There is an old water line that connects into a hydrant that's located here. That is not a loop system. It dead ends. And there is a provision in Dennis Cohane's approved amended subdivision proposal that he's supposed to connect to this point, but we propose to bring a new 8-inch water line in with a new hydrant here and another hydrant here. There's no other hydrant on the length of this way at all. There is a hydrant on the property, on the Turner property that's approximate off the existing driveway and off the way on the other side. So widening to 18 feet would provide adequate passing length, would provide safe passage, obviously, for emergency and other vehicles. There's room to create some form of pedestrian access. We're not proposing a 4.5-foot sidewalk, but there is room to create some additional shoulder area on either side to address that. We do show preliminarily stormwater retention here and here on the Turner property with some manholes, but we haven't, other than showing potential locations, we haven't really designed that and gone specifically to that. Two comments that we had in meeting with the fire chief, Jack Grant, and with Mr. Clark were, one, minimum width of paved area 18 feet with adequate turning radius, and two is clearing the brush out, because right now it's a very narrow, sort of a tunnel effect with the brush. He wants that clear. Obviously, 18 feet wide right-of-way will make that possible. We haven't specifically considered lighting, which obviously is an issue. There are utility poles along the way. Consideration might be given to burying the utility lines. There's obviously a cost. We'd prefer not to do that, but that's a possibility. Whether you do that, there is sewer, private sewer, with a force main that was installed by the Paxias, who I think are here. The Turners are a party to an agreement with respect to that. There's no as-built filed with the town, so it's not clear where the sewer line actually is, but we understand that there is a force main that runs out to Brush Hill Road and up and ties into the town sewer at Walcott. And so there's access to that sewer. We just need to know where it is and how to tie in. So water, utilities, sewer, there's adequate capacity and there's adequate ability to provide for that. So I think those are the major issues. You know, it's taking what is currently a bad situation and improving it. One other issue, I know that it's an issue really with the design of Brush Hill Road, but you know, this is not currently a 90-degree angle. We can straighten that to some degree. One of the benefits, I think, to widening is that currently, if a vehicle is stopped, ready to exit the way and either take a right or a left, if another vehicle were to be coming to turn in, it has to wait for that vehicle to leave. That is a dangerous situation in itself, particularly with shorter sight lines. So if there's a vehicle that's slowing and stopping and waiting for another car to exit, that's a condition that can be improved by widening it adequately so you have the ability to turn in and to turn out. And there are other, you know, things that can be done, mirrors or other things that could be done to improve sight. So that's a preliminary, obviously very preliminary overview. We look forward to questions and comments that the board would have, and other comments. We do understand that this is a little bit of an iterative process at the moment. We had reached out to the neighbors, to council. We've received no comment back from them on whether and how it might be improved. We understand the neighbors' position is they don't want it touched in any way, and so I think the council's hands were probably tied in his ability to speak to me, respond to my calls on that regard. So with that, I'll hand it off back to the board. Happy to answer questions.
Okay. Yeah.
Question. Can you remind us who owns the roadway? And does Ms. Turner have the ability to make adjustments as she sees fit?
It's unclear who owns the roadway. It's owned, I think, by the heirs of Howard Coonley. So the road was created by Howard Coonley, who at one time owned substantial portions of the property and sold at various times, created the lots that Paxia and Lori Leo acquired. He created those whose subdivisions created in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. This road was is identified in all the plans going back to the 20s as Upper Road and a right-of-way to Brush Hill Road. The last lot that he owned was Dennis Cohane's house. Dennis Cohane purchased that property, and he has 51 feet of frontage on the 20-foot way that comes with it. This property was conveyed to Rackaman, and I can go back and kind of run through the title on that. And at the time it was conveyed, this property did not have access to this property. Subsequent to that, there was a conveyance from Rackaman to, forget the name, and Coonley deeded that grantee access to the way for all purposes for which ways are used. So this property has a deeded right of access to that roadway. They could punch a driveway out tomorrow if they wanted to, simply to provide access for this lot. The purpose, obviously, is to improve the road, to allow 2 new lots to be divided. This is a almost 4-acre parcel. I think it's the largest one of the largest remaining parcels in this part of the town. So Coonley's heirs presumably own the right-of-way. It may be that the abutters own to the middle. That's not clear. That right-of-way itself was never deeded to anyone. Perhaps Dennis owns it. I don't know. But my sense is, I mean, it's a way. It was identified as a way. It was provided to. It was built and made available to provide access to people who would be accessing Brush Hill Road, and so there is no clear sense of who, what's the title in the way. I don't know. Then everyone who these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all have deeded rights of access to use it. None of them can close it off, and I think that either and any of them have the right to improve it as a result.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't hear the last line.
I said, they have this. We have the right. Anyone who has access to the way has the right to improve it for the purpose of improving their access.
How many lots are there now? Is it one lot?
It's one lot that's about 3.78 acres.
171,000 square feet, more or less.
It's all this, Alex. This is the entirety of the existing lot. Oops. So it owns to the middle of this portion of the other right-of-way. Goes around. It's got this stub that runs down parallel to, I think it's Wayne and the road, and then all the way up to a point where it curves this way.
Okay.
That's almost 4 acres. The proposal is to create 2 lots with frontage on Upper Way and to retain the lot with the existing dwelling with access to the other 25-foot way.
Okay, it seems to me we should go directly to the public and hear what they have to say. But why don't we do that? Looks like we have a lawyer here to get the ball rolling.
Hi, good evening, members of the planning board. My name is Attorney Robert Galvin. I am counsel for about a dozen families that live above and around this particular parcel of land, and I'll tell you their names for the record. Jeffrey Patterson and Susan Tractor of 1033 Brush Hill Road. They're located immediately to the left-hand side behind the Turner property. Stephen and Christine Paxia, who are located approximately in the area where the directional arrow is located. They're at 1027 Brush Hill Road. Jan Yurkovich and Lisa Leo, their property actually has legal frontage on Wolcott Road and Brush Hill Road. They're located just to the north of the upper road. Peter Leaf and Patricia Waterman of 1015 Brush Hill Road. John and Colette Wayne. Their property is right in front of this proposed parcel of land. Bjorn Olson and Rebecca Simmons, their property is also in front of the proposed property along Brush Hill Road. Richard and Virginia Fanning, their property is located below the Wayne property and the other property, Olson and Simmons. Their property fronts on the 25-foot lower road. I also represent Gerald Roach of 1067 Brush Hill Road, and Dennis and Mary Cohane, whose property is located up next to the Paxia and Patterson tractor property. I submitted a letter so that you would have my comments in the record. All of my clients would likely have legal standing for that to be an issue. We engaged the firm of McKenzie Engineering Group to conduct what I would call a peer review of the proposed preliminary subdivision plan, and I sent that in a couple of days ago. It contains basically a review of the proposed preliminary plans compliance with your rules and regulations for preliminary plans. It also contains an examination of the extent to which the plan complies or does not comply with your regular subdivision rules and regulations. And the reason we do that is because although this is a preliminary plan is to be gauged and adjudged on the basis of its compliance with your subdivision rules and regulations. So hopefully the comments from McKenzie Engineering Group were helpful. Mr. Guglielmi is with me tonight in case there was an engineering question. So kind of summing things up, I can appreciate that the board would like to know how to make the plan acceptable to my clients. The reality is the plan is so very deficient that it's missing things that we would even need to know to be able to give that answer were we willing to do that. But the reality is the plan is so very deficient in so many regards, and in the most important regards that we're not in a position to tell you anything other than how we think it doesn't comply at this particular stance. I can appreciate Attorney Corcoran's position that he takes the perspective that they're taking a bad situation and making it better. Well, what they're taking is a bad situation that's a very dangerous situation. They're creating a 3-lot subdivision where there's 1 lot, adding additional traffic to a situation and not really addressing, at least at this particular stage, the problems that make it so hazardous. So from that perspective, it's a very bad situation for my clients, and it's not a position where we've really even been made an offer that we can intelligently and reasonably respond to. The situation out there is extremely bad, and the waivers that have been requested in the review or in the applicant's letter are, I think, 6 waivers total. I think we counted 22 that would be required. A little bit about waivers, without lecturing to you all. You've been on the board for a while. I don't mean to speak down to you if you view it that way, but the reality is waivers have to be in the public interest. And there's very little here that I see that would be in anybody's interest other than Ms. Turner's interest. Obviously, she wants to develop her property. I understand that. My clients all understand that. But what's shown on this plan only serves to protect her interests and not the public interests. I outlined in my letter what I thought were the 6 or 7 most salient points as to how this plan doesn't comply. The issues that I raise have to do with the most important issues of sight distance. On the upper road, left and right, there's inadequate sight distance. That's the distance when you're located about 10 to 14 feet back from the edge of Brush Hill Road, and you look left and to your right as you try to make a safe access onto Brush Hill Road. How far up the road can you see? And it's virtually non-existent to the left, and it's deficient to the right. And because it's a narrower distance than what the subdivision rules and regulations allow, these are situations that extend off of their property, and they can't necessarily fix it. All they have is 40 feet, so that they don't have the appropriate curves, vertical curves. The roadway, for anybody that's been out there, doesn't align with Brush Hill Road at a 90-degree angle, and it's on the inside of a curve, which makes it a very hazardous situation, because vehicles that are traveling from north to south on Brush Hill Road, which frequently speed, as evident by an accident that occurred a couple of weeks ago, are coming around that curve, and they will hit a car that's attempting to make and accelerate out of that area. And the area has not been proposed to be regraded to be flat, so it's likely, particularly in the wintertime, you'll have a difficult time stopping. The grades in that area, according to your maximum grades, would be 6% at the highest, and these are 8% and higher. The proposed dead-end roadway is longer. I appreciate that the chief thinks that maybe it's a potentially solvable issue, but it's significantly longer than the 500 feet. It's significantly more harsh of a grade. It doesn't have any of the things that would be required under a normal situation. There's no roadway cross-section, so we don't know what the makeup of this proposed 18-foot roadway is. And although there are 4 collection basins shown, they're not connected to anything, and we have no idea whether they'll be able to even infiltrate the water within the layout of the proposed roadway. When you come down the hill, if you're increasing the amount of impervious surface, the water has to flow somewhere, and it's not going to be able to be permitted to flow out onto Brush Hill Road. The soil conditions are difficult in that area. They would not be able to go east or west, and it would unlikely they would be going to the north towards the Yurkovik and the Leo property, because that's up gradient, and going downstream next to the Wayne property would potentially flood their property. So we have some very significant issues there. The applicant would be obligated to provide you calculations necessary to show that they could contain the 100-year storm. We don't believe that they would ever be able to do that, given what we believe the soil conditions are in that area. And the waivers would be extreme, and from our perspective, create a very bad precedent, make it more difficult for the planning board when faced with another circumstance where you're asked to compromise. You'd be faced with the argument, well, you're compromised here, therefore you have to compromise there. In a variant situation with the Zoning Board of Appeals, it's very easy to distinguish one fact pattern from another. But as a trial attorney that tries these type of cases, the one thing that I do is I look for patterns in planning board action. And when I see planning boards waiving rules and regulations, particularly ones that relate to the health, safety, and welfare of people as this proposed subdivision creates, you're on a slippery slope, and it would be one example of what I would use potentially against the planning board at some point in the future if a future waiver were denied. So I hope you understand our position. It is a very preliminary plan. Perhaps our position would change, but we realize right now that there are such material limitations on what they can actually do here that it may not be possible to do anything that solves the issues.
Well, if it was a 36-foot wide road, how would that satisfy you? Would that satisfy you if it were 36 feet or 24 feet?
I don't think that they could actually construct it, because they wouldn't be able to, they'd create new and different issues. I can appreciate what you're saying. You're saying,
I mean,
do we prefer to have a highway?
Do you think that a narrow road is better than a wider road?
Certainly.
Well, so 18 feet is less than the 24 feet than is usual, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So that's, if it were 16 feet, that would be better still, wouldn't it, as far as you're concerned?
16 feet?
Yeah.
Well, 16 feet wouldn't even allow 2 vehicles to pass, which is essential for the fire chief.
Well, if there were a shoulder, it would be.
The problem is there isn't a shoulder here, and they haven't shown any grades. And
I understand that, but
having-
you can talk shoulder. I mean, that's the sort of thing that we'd be interested in. If you say, well, 18 feet is too much, why don't you do less than that and have a shoulder? I mean, that's something that could be considered. I mean, if you walk out of here and say, we're just against it, they will file their definitive plan, and you'll have had no particular input into what's in it. It doesn't hurt you to say what would make a better plan.
Well, I think that was the purpose of me engaging an engineer to outline how the plan was deficient, so that the applicant would understand the very many ways that the plan is deficient in detail and could be made to comply at least better. I haven't suggested that,
Well,
I haven't suggested
I
anything
mean,
in
you
particular.
agree it could be made better. We have a question for you.
Could I just ask one other point? The question was, who owns the roadway? I looked at the same issue. I had the title done as well, and I think Mr. Corcoran is right. I think it probably, title is vested in the Cohanes. But I'm not certain that adding additional homes is within the scope of rights, although the ability to improve the road may be within the scope of the rights of way. There's a concept in the law called overburdening of the easement. And although the applicant for the 4-acre parcel may have received the benefit of the right-of-way, this proposal is for 3 homes, not 1 home. And there is a potential argument here that is a legal argument in nature that it is an overburdening of the right-of-way.
And are you going to suggest that this is a issue that the planning board should determine?
Well, I think the planning board has every ability and legal right to determine who owns the roadway, because you're going to be asked
And
covenants.
who has access to it? I mean, it's a question that you say is not particularly clear.
Well, I think it's pretty clear who owns the roadway. Mr. Cohane is the last owner of a lot in a subdivision, and as the owner of the last lot in a subdivision who had the right here, I believe it is Mr. Cohane who owns the roadway, subject to the rights that have been granted to others.
And the question is whether or not there's a right to improve.
I think it's less a question of whether there's a right to improve, is whether there is a right to take a lot that was anticipated as being 1 lot and then making 3 out of it. And there's an overburdening issue.
Okay, well, that's an interesting legal issue. I'm glad that you raised these issues for the planning board to determine. We have a question for you.
Yes, I apologize for being late. You mentioned having retained an engineer. Do you have a letter or a report from that engineer? I didn't see it in this packet. Is it? It's packet,
The
okay.
McKenzie Engineering Group
Okay.
letter?
And did they do soils analysis when you mentioned that the soils are not capable of,
No, we just have information from residents.
okay, thank you.
And we've been to the site. The engineers have been to the site.
And we've been to the site.
Yep.
The planning board has been to the site. What about this second roadway? Is that
Well,
any issues on that?
Well,
I mean, that's providing frontage for one of the houses.
I don't know if it actually provides frontage for one of the houses. It provides access for the house, the existing home. That does not comply with the rules and regulations, but it's an existing condition. The accident that occurred on August 8th, that I gave you a copy of the police report, actually occurred there. If you go out there, there is not sufficient sight distance, but you know, the applicant is not proposing to add more homes that will access off of that area, so I would posit that that is not a safe situation, but the applicant isn't doing anything necessarily to that area to make it worse. It's,
But they're cutting off the house from frontage on Upper Road, and so they're, of necessity, the frontage has to be on Lower Road or whatever it's
there's
called.
no existing access way out there now, so.
You're saying that it's grandfathered?
No, functionally, the Lower Road serves as its only access. And I don't know that there's frontage on any way. This is a lot that is grandfathered without legal frontage.
But it's grandfathered at
I think it has frontage.
171,000 square feet.
I agree, area-wise. It does actually have a small strip of frontage on Brush Hill Road that was left just above the
Right there,
Wayne
yeah.
property.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't say it has no frontage. It has a modest frontage that's not consistent with the zoning bylaw. And I do think it is grandfathered, and that's why you have an existing.
And you can just take, it keeps its grandfathering even if you subdivide it?
Well, I think that's an issue for the applicant. You
Well,
may-
it's
you may create an
according to
issue.
you, it's an issue for the planning board.
It may be an issue for the planning board.
So you're
I
just
was less-
piling up the legal issues for us.
Well, I think I'm helping you then. I hate to be the harbinger of bad news, but it is a complicated situation, and I think we owe it to you to tell you all the problems we see.
All right, well, we're hoping that some people tell us the problems that they see in this preliminary plan and how it could be made better, because it doesn't hurt to say how the plan could be made better, because if you get a definitive plan that looks exactly the same as this, you've lost an opportunity. I mean, admittedly, all these issues your engineer has brought up are issues which have to be addressed, and it's good to have them on the table. But if there is a good way of addressing any of these issues, and people have ideas on how they would be sensitively and thoughtfully addressed, why not share it with us? I mean, we're going to have to decide at some point whether or not to grant approval to a definitive plan.
I understand, but maybe you will deny on the basis that it doesn't comply with so many things, and they don't have ability to solve. And
That's right. And if there is an ability to solve, why not solve them?
Well, that's probably the question that we think they have the obligation to come forth with. I mean, it's not our job to tell them how to make this roadway.
If you have some great ideas, you should not hide them under a rock. You should share them.
Can I interject?
Yeah?
My name's Rich Fanning. I'm a direct abutter below the house on Brush Hill Road with access on the lower road.
I guess when you interject, is it okay if he interjects?
Yes. These are my clients.
I think we have to speak a little bit to, when you ask us, hey, we'd really like to work with the neighbors. I don't want to speak for all of my neighbors, but I'll speak for myself and our current situation. I'm not sure if the board is aware of the recent history and what's been transpiring on the property. I hope that you are, but it's not relevant to your situation, but I think it goes to motivation, character, and what's happening at the property. So we have problems with, we'd love to work with our neighbor in good conscience and maybe work out some type of solution, but our neighbor is already costing the town, legal counsel for the town, abutters, police department. We've got an injunction, I believe, from the town issued against the neighbor. I'm not sure the board's aware of that.
Let's just keep
trying to
it-
stick to the facts. I'm trying to stick to the
Let's keep
facts.
personalities and,
Nothing to do with personalities, it goes
all
to
right.
motivation.
well,
So
I
if
mean,
we,
motivation is whatever it is.
but Alex, you asked our attorney, our counsel, if there was something we could work out. If, with a normal, reasonable person who had
But once
had a plan,
again,
had a.
let's
with-
keep
with-
it above
I get
board.
it, I
Let's
get it.
not have,
I get it. We can't, in good faith, work in good faith because we've seen no good faith from our abutter, our neighbor, okay? So that's, I'll try to say it, I can't say it any other way. I think the town is well aware, and you could speak to town council about it, is well aware what's transpired there, the recent history and an ongoing history for some time now, a lack of cooperation with the neighborhood, and I don't see that changing. So when I see the gentleman here talking about the trees that he had at Beechwood, and he needs resolution, and then he says that Doug Hunt didn't get paid for the trees, that would call into question, well, when you come back, when you're trying to work with that same person, it's not going to work out. That's how I feel personally. I'm not going to speak for my neighbors. So I want to answer your question, which is, if we're not willing, you seem to want to put us in a box and say, hey, this is what you need to do.
it doesn't put you in a box, because when it comes time, when the definitive plan comes out, you've given away no rights at all.
Right, and I would defer to what our counsel said earlier. We have a
Look,
plan that
if
has no real detail in it. No detail. We have an accident that just happened, that someone was almost seriously hurt directly in front of the property. We've got sewers that are overloading,
Look,
a sewer
You-
backup
you
in that
say
neighborhood.
there has to, you say the sewer needs to be improved, that you can say that.
Yeah.
You can say the drainage is very important.
drainage
That's easy to do.
okay.
You can say the sightlines at Brush Hill Road are inadequate. Those are
I would
three
say
things
all-
you can say.
All those three things,
Well, there are more.
many more,
Well,
many
you
more.
should say them.
Yeah, I think you're talking about if you need to widen the road to the conforming length that you want to talk about taking down trees, there's no way it feasible that you can possibly widen that road without wiping out substantial amounts of vegetation. And if you go up the street and look at what's happened at Woodmere and some of the other projects in the neighborhood, you'll see that the trees are vanishing from this, I think they call it is it a historic district? I thought it was, but it doesn't seem to be with recent actions that have been
It's a scenic-
sanctified by the
it's a
town
scenic
and this
road.
board.
Brush Hill Road's a scenic road.
a
That's as
scenic
close
road.
as we get.
It's not a historic, it has no historic covenant.
Does it have it? Is there a Brush Hill Historic District? What?
Yes, there is a designated historic segment of Brush Hill Road.
That was my understanding, like Woods Hill, like Woods is on Harlan over there in that area. My understanding was that we had that designation. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I
That's,
mean, the question is,
You would know more than I would.
what does it carry with it as far as legal rights?
right.
And I don't know, but if there are legal rights, you've got a lawyer who can advise us.
No, I think you were asking for opinions or someone of the neighbors to speak, and our lawyer is here to speak on our behalf, and I think he's doing what he needs to do by the law. But if you're asking about the neighborhood and what we think, I can tell you what I think. I can't speak for anyone
You
else.
say you can't work with them and you won't work with them.
I didn't say that. I said that based on the history, that it's not a tenable situation. It can't happen because of what's happened and transpired in the recent past.
Okay.
Okay? If you have a dog and I come to your house every day and the dog bites me, I'm not going to come over and see the dog.
Look,
Right?
Okay, thanks for interjecting. You still have the floor.
I'm all set.
Any other questions for the lawyer? You want another interjection?
I do. They live there. I don't. So I think it's helpful to hear from them.
Okay.
I think a lot has boiled up to the surface. Just wanted to take a step back and
Just wanna
echo
make sure you
echo
get
some.
that phrase.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Susan Tracta. We're the direct abutter at 1033 Brush Hill Road, immediately adjacent to 1065. I think we've become a little bit conflated about all of the issues here because we find it very, very difficult to systematically address all of the potential waivers that are needed here. And that's for two reasons. One, because A, there are so many, and B, because there are issues that we haven't addressed, like the drainage, the lower road, the existing structures, the character and nature of the neighborhood, trees. We can, as non-technical people, non-attorney and non-engineer, say that this neighborhood is a delicate balance. And respectfully, we really do not believe that a full subdivision of 3 houses can be made compliant. And we're very concerned for our own rights as property holders. We are in a neighborhood that will change dramatically. And we feel that, again, with all due respect, if the board systematically goes through all of these variances and complies with as many as possible, we still question the overall gain from this exercise. Again, this is the benefit of one existing property that's a lovely property. But any change to it in this manner is going to be to the detriment of all of the abutters, and we are unanimous in this. We don't have the technical skill or the engineering knowledge to give you the laundry list of reasons that we know as property owners. We know our properties and we know the neighborhood, and this just won't work. This is not a good subdivision, and we're not against subdivision. In the neighborhood, we've undergone 2. Dennis Cohane subdivided his property without any opposition. It's a beautiful subdivision that served only to better the neighborhood.
It's not completed, by the way.
What we've experienced so
It's
far
only
is
half
lovely.
complete.
Okay. What we've experienced so far has blended beautifully into the character and not served to create any new issues in the neighborhood. Similarly, Jan Yurkovic and Lisa DeLeo have subdivided their property. That made sense. This doesn't make sense.
And we talked with Mr. Culhane at length about how to make it so that it blends in, and there were lots of various ideas discussed. And we had a discussion of ideas, and eventually we came up with something that the neighborhood
We
could
thank
live
you
with.
for the exercise.
Okay, but you know, that's...
But this doesn't fall in that
you're,
category.
You're
This
now
is-
saying that you won't
This is
do it
over,
again.
but only not because of any desire not to, but just because of the logistic reality that we can't see how this works. There are so many issues, and many of them have not come to the, not developed to a sufficient level of specificity that we can even answer them or ask the right questions. But we do know that we have a neighborhood that has a very unique character, and that these changes are so significant, we can automatically see just broad issues. And our attorney and the engineers have brought up all of these other waivers. How far do we need to go to make something happen that just from a gut sense does not feel like it should and really does impact our rights as property owners that we honestly must defend? And we really do oppose this subdivision. And we gratefully thank you for this time here, but we ask that you please consider that point of view.
Yep.
I want to put in front of the neighborhood a caution, because I'm concerned that all of these, you could get to a point where many of these conditions could be met. And that might be a situation that's far worse for what you're calling the character of the neighborhood. But I think the property rights, and there's been some legal questions raised, but I think the property rights probably allow for them, maybe barring those legal questions. So I think what Alex is saying, what the board is asking is, if we need to find a balance here as the planning board, where does the neighborhood want to be? Because if the definitive subdivision plan comes back and shows a 5% grade and retaining walls and an 18-foot width, which we've granted before, and a 500-foot, less than 500 foot, we've waived that many times. The fire chief is signing off on it. They have utilities, they've improved visibility. If they're able to achieve these things, I want the neighborhood to think about if it's more detrimental. Where are your give points? Because I just want to be careful that they're not going to meet every one of the obligations that they need to meet, and as a result, you're going to end up with something you don't want even more. So that as a planning board, we can only say no to so much on a subdivision. So I just put that out there for you.
I do qualify all my remarks with the fact that I'm the least qualified person to answer that, and we defer to our attorney and engineers for advice on this.
I did want to just add to the discussion that I did talk to Fire Chief Grant, and while there was a discussion, as Ned described, he hasn't looked at the plan, he hasn't, he hasn't stamped it, So in concept, I think he said he would prefer 18 feet, he'd turn around.
All I'm trying to say is, if they're going to put something forward, let's be careful as the abutters that they don't get more than they're bargaining for, in the sense that all of a sudden we have an 18-foot or worse, a 24-foot potentially wide roadway that meets a certain grade, and there's retaining walls, and there's light stanchions, and there's a sidewalk, and just caution. That's all I'm asking.
Question. So the Kinsale Lane property has access off Walcott, which is one of the subdivisions you mentioned. The Yurkovic properties, those also have access
It's
via
Brush Hill,
Walcott?
and their driveway is actually off of Walcott.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, to that question though, do they have
They have
access?
They have access onto the upper road.
They do? Okay.
Yes.
I think that was your
That
question.
was my question.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I was curious, and you may, but somebody in the room will probably have the answer to this. When you come onto Upper Road, on the left, is that retaining walls kind of on the left on Ms. Turner's property? I noticed some walls in there.
Can you Google Earth up?
Are those?
Next to the barn.
Yeah, Ms. Turner.
I believe it's on the Wayne's property. It's their wall.
It's my wall,
you can
and
see it
I
better
own
on-
28 feet from to the left of the existing Alcoa Road.
Okay.
That's my wall.
And is it a retaining wall or is it just a stone wall? It doesn't necessarily
Because I
retain
don't
it.
currently use that.
It
as
is a
my-
retaining wall.
It is a retaining wall.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Because the road is elevated at the top, the road is level with the top of the wall.
Okay, okay, thank you. And I was curious if anyone knows, and I can double check this at another time, but I know parts of Brush Hill Road are considered scenic and parts are considered historic. Do we know what this portion is? Do we know what, do we have any historians?
The whole
think
thing is
so.
scenic.
The whole thing is a scenic road. I don't know where the historic portion is that's being used in reference to.
I'll make a comment on the historic, as far as I understand in Milton. If it's a National Register Historic District, that allows for, certain opportunities on the, whether it be tax credits or other things, but there's nothing in our local, we don't have a historic commission which has historic designations, that have, to Alex's point of the legal standing to put restrictions on what people can do with their properties. That's my understanding when I've talked about this, at other times, because when there's been conversations about like the Swift Hat House, et cetera. The only thing that Milton has, as far as I understand, is demolition delay, which I think at the moment is 6 or 9 months or something like that. But historic districts that the town would designate could put different protections in if the town chooses to pursue those, but we don't have those right now. So even if it's a district like Scottswoods or something on the National Register, it doesn't offer protections.
Right, right. I know that there's something about certain stone walls along Brush Hill Road.
Stone walls are protected by the scenic road
The
provision.
scenic road,
But
yeah.
scenic
Not
road.
historic, it's scenic road provision.
But that,
That's not implicated here.
yeah.
The house at Woodmere, the old mansion at Woodmere is on this state's historic register. As part of that development, the developer agreed to retain and restore it. Could have waited out the demolition delay process and removed it, but obviously it was an important part of the permitting and the back and forth with the town, that was an important building to save. And so they did.
Well, the Forbes House Museum, for example, is a national, federal historic landmark. It's under a certain, I forget the highest level of designation. So, but when they've applied for grant money through the Mass Historic Commission, which put preservation restrictions on it. So that means there's a lot of scrutiny over what they can do to that property because of the preservation restrictions. But because it has that designation, it allowed them to apply for grant money. So there could be properties that are could be individually protected under similar circumstances, but if it's a National Register Historic District, there's per se, we would need other kinds of protections in order to protect the district.
And Scenic Way, I understand, protects trees. I didn't think to check for any specimen trees right at the entry that would be on Brush Hill, but it's just another question I had. So
Are we able to get it, Bill?
Almost.
Almost.
I just have a quick question. If the road gets expanded right now...
You want to come up and so people can hear your question.
I just had a quick question. Right now, all the neighbors contribute and pay for the plowing of that road. Anything that needs to be done to that road is done. There's no association. There's no legal binding agreement. There's nothing. We pay, we chip in, and we chop it up, and we pay. And we pay for the plow that does the entire road. significant road. It's pretty long when you think about it. If you have to pave it, that's going to be pretty significant cost, and it winds all the way along and back. If this were to move forward, is the town going to pay to plow that road? Are they going to take care of that road, or is that going to continue? Is that additional, larger, bigger, newer road going to fall on our shoulders to pay to maintain? That's my question.
Well, you've got a lawyer who
Street
can
view on Google Maps.
answer it.
Street view on Google Maps, that might do better.
You want me to answer that question? I don't know if I can answer it, but I would think if they're going to increase the cost and maintenance of this aspect of the road, then they're going to be responsible for it.
Thank you.
Looks like there's someone else who wants to speak out.
Hi,
Hi.
my name's Colette Wayne. I live at 1045 Brush Hill Road, directly below and abuts that little pork chop. So I just wanted to speak to, I feel particularly vulnerable with this potential widening. What's maybe not being taken into account is with these old property lines. When we bought the property 15 years ago, we rebuilt the barn, and we excavated and put in walls and redid it. It's a hillside barn, so it's very low to the ground in the back. It's only a few feet above grade. The property line literally behind the barn is maybe 6 feet to 8 feet. At the corner of the barn, it's less than that, I think. So I feel like I have no protection. She's thinking of widening the road. And then on top of it, I live in this bowl. It's all downgrade. And so I have had water issues when we did the barn. We tried to put in drainage. We've done drainage for the house. But it's a constant issue when we have heavy rains. My basement still floods. And I just feel like this, I have my patio right in the back. That road is elevated. There is overgrowth now, which is kind of nice because it's protected a little bit, but you start to widen that road, and I feel like it's getting closer and closer to my patio and to my backyard, which is my little, I just feel like this is a problem, and it's a worry for me. Sorry.
You feel 18 feet maybe too wide,
I feel
and maybe
feel
you
like
want it
the way
pushed
the road-
away from you.
but it's
I
not
mean,
fair to the Leafs either, because their backyard is right there. And, we bought, we saw, we knew, but, to start thinking about widening a road, there's a retaining wall there, which she won't admit to, but that wall is, maybe 5 feet, 4 to 5 feet. It's her property, but, you have to encroach in that. Then if you have to rebuild another wall, that's moving closer into my backyard. I literally, between that wall now and where my property line is I think at the widest is 17 feet. So, with it being elevated, I'm just trying to protect, my property, obviously, my privacy, obviously. And it's a historic home. I just feel like she's got room to grow, I've got no protection. And it's because of these old property lines, and that's okay, but, the wall behind that runs, there's another stone retaining wall at the back of my property that I believe Juliet owns, that is crumbling into my property and collapsing now. And so, again, I live in a bowl, drainage is an issue. The tennis courts behind my home it's all elevated, so everything is gonna it's gonna drain down into my yard. So I have grave concerns about widening the road, I have grave concerns about the development, so it leads right to the back of my barn, into the corner, into the side, and into my property, and all drainage. So, that's all I wanted to say. Does anyone have any
well,
questions?
as you know, we considered the applicant here came in with a plan to create 2 lots on the existing road. And
It's not retaining though, because
The
contents
fire
are going
chief
this
said
way.
that one of them was not adequate for his apparatus, and it's not adequate for the people who live there now, as well as for these two new homes. And the other roadway, the board expressed a number of concerns about. This is Lower Road, about its adequacy. And
I see.
it was my impression that the neighborhood consensus was don't grant these lots on the existing road. We would prefer that there be a subdivision. And that's what's happening now. This is a subdivision plan resulting from our decision not to permit two new houses to be built on the existing roadway. And at the time, I said, you know, we'll reach out and be as cooperative as we can to meet your issues, but we got to know what your issues are. If you don't tell us what your issues are, how can we meet them? I mean, you've told us what your issues are. If there are other such issues, we'd like to know what they are. Simple as that.
I mean, from my perspective, that's exactly what we tried to tell you. You have an unsafe situation. They're not taking a bad situation and making it better. They're adding two new homes here onto an existing deficient roadway. We said that there isn't sight distance. We said that there's not adequate drainage. We said that, there's 22 separate rules that this doesn't comply with, and they asked for 6 waivers. These are the issues that we're trying to explain to you. And I think what Mr. Fanning was trying to explain to you was that the property there, the Turner properties, was used like as an Airbnb residence, which was a considerable disruption to the neighborhood, resulted in zoning enforcement action. And that's not trying to be personal. It was an unlawful use of the property that resulted in zoning enforcement action. And, perhaps there'll be something that can be done, but there's a lot of mistrust.
Okay. Yes, sir. Identify yourself.
Steve Paxi at 1027 Brush Hill Road. And
Bring the microphone.
I was interested in Mr. Corcoran's original presentation. He said he sees this as an iterative process. So I'm interested in where the iterations are, because if we're going from this preliminary plan to a final plan without any other opportunity for input, I don't consider that particularly iterative. I think he should be presenting us with renderings of what the various roads would look like. I think he should be talking about the trees, the specimen trees, what he's doing about that. I think we should be having these specific locations of all of the things that are mentioned. It's like, looking at the jacket of a book and saying that might or might not be a good book, but there's no detail for us to respond to. And I hear you saying to us, we need your constructive thoughts, but it's impossible for us to be constructive about a plan that's so preliminary. I mean, we need more detail, we need more information, and we need them to respond to the concerns we have with positive solutions that we could respond to and react to.
The definitive plan will have all the details will be there. And I was looking at the waivers. Here it says that the proposed roadway design does not include sidewalks with handicap ramps. Do you want sidewalks with handicap ramps?
The fact, I don't think you're hearing exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, we're not experts. We've said what our concerns are, but they could be a lot more definitive in what some of the options could be so that we could have a constructive conversation.
It's going to be definitive. It's going to be a definitive plan. But once it's definitive, the ability to change it is significantly less.
But why can't there be a second preliminary plan that we can respond to. He said it was an iterative process.
If I may, our thought is to provide a second preliminary plan and to continue this hearing until another night when we will be back to do that. There are fundamental decision points even now as to how we would present that next plan. Particularly, how do we address the grading of the road and things like that. So if they're gonna leave it to us to come back with our determinations to what the grade should be and what the width of the pavement should be and what the drainage, and then how to drain it, we'll do that. And we'll come back and we'll have a second meeting and the board can determine whether or not we've come far enough and we go forward to definitive subdivision. But I meant what I said when I said iterative process. We look forward to that. This is a complicated approach to fixing some significant problems. We're not going to fix all of them, but we think we can fix a lot of them, and we can improve things in the process. We're looking for some guidance as to how our engineers go back and go forward.
Okay, Brian?
So, I want to give the neighborhood some cover that we are hearing what their concerns are. I get it. You've outlined where the plan is deficient. Got it. And I think we know that. But I think more importantly, from the people who are, from the neighbors, from the abutters who are coming up and speaking, I think we've heard sewer is inadequate. I'm doing this for Ned's benefit as well. Sewer is inadequate. Sight lines are inadequate. Stormwater issues are a major concern for drainage purposes, in particular for the people down at the bottom of the road, the wains, and I don't think for the least as much because I think the elevation is pretty significant there, but certainly for the wains. Loss of specimen trees has come up a couple of times. Crumbling retaining walls has come up. I've got notes all over the place, but certainly the pavement width has been an issue, the sight lines are an issue, fire chief access, adding a new hydrant, consider, what are we gonna do about lighting? So we definitely have heard all of these concerns, and I think part of this iterative process would be that this second round would come back and start to solve some of these problems. And I think what the applicant probably wants to hear before they leave is where this board is on some of it. But I think like you, I think we want the applicant to sort of come back to us with another round and tell us how they're gonna solve some of these concerns. But that's what this process is where are the concerns, and then we'll look at it again.
Well, and if there's going to be an iterative process, I think it needs to be more visual than a schematic. So, because if you're asking lay people to comment on something and say, what would they prefer, they need to be able to have a better way of envisioning what they prefer. Not, I mean, if you say, would you rather have a 5% grade or an 8% grade? I don't know what that looks like. They do. That's the kind of thing we need to see is, if the goal is dialogue, we need to have something to respond to that doesn't take a professional engineer.
Well, you've got a professional engineer.
Well, we do, and
so will they. So,
But-
look, to a certain extent, this board has to rely on the experts to tell us, all right, they're gonna say that if you do these 5 or 6 things, that's gonna control the stormwater. And this board has to take that engineer expert on its faith, and if it doesn't work, they have to come back and fix it. They have to incorporate a plan that will say that.
Well, we would do a peer review also.
All right, we have another question
But we
here.
still rely on an expert.
Yeah.
More, not necessarily a question, but more of a comment. I think to address some of the concerns, and if I were to answer, how would I like to see information conveyed, I agree that graphics, because I prepare graphics and I understand how to read them, the graphics are important, a lot more important than words. And the engineers, when they do the stormwater, that's a different thing, but to understand the change in topography, I'd have to have something that I think is a fairly accurate topographic plan. So the engineer has to come back and tell us how accurate is this topography. Sometimes they pull it off GIS and it's not as accurate as it might be, and sometimes we've had them come in and show us that it's pretty accurate. So I'd like to have an understanding of that existing topography I'd like to have an
It was
understanding.
surveyed.
Okay.
It's all surveyed.
So then if we have an enlargement, particularly of critical points like the intersection of Brush Hill Road, we ought to have that topography come into the neighboring properties a little bit, but where they're so close to this proposed roadway. We should have what I view as more of an architectural section versus this type of section, which is more of an engineering kind of grade section. But like a roadway cross-section, I think is helpful, and that should show the retaining or the existing stone wall, whether it's retaining or not. Maybe it's cut at a couple sections, how much. It's hard for me to tell from this drawing how much of it's really retaining and how much of it's just a landscape stone wall. And then the specimen trees, we should have a fairly accurate understanding of where they are. And we've had recent instances where the plans have been wrong, so I'd like to have a true understanding. So if it's 10 trees or if it's 20 trees, that could be significant. And if they're 12-inch versus 18 or 24-inch, that's significant, in my opinion, for what that change is going to be like. Because we've had lots of discussions about width of roadways, and there is impact on stormwater. The wider you go, the more impervious surface you have. You could, that's a significant thing. Curb and gutter versus Cape Cod, and that's significant in terms of how the water flows. It's also significant in terms of snow plowing. So these are details that are important, particularly when the neighbors are paying for the maintenance of the roadway. I live in a similar situation, and we pay for that maintenance. And so you want to be clear about what's being proposed in terms of that roadway section, right? I think correct, stop me if I'm repeating myself, but the sight lines at the Brush Hill Road, not just a plan, but really something that gives, like was done for Pulte, like was done at Woodmere, give people an idea of what that is really kind of going to look like at that entrance. So if it's 5%, if it's 8%, if there's a flat section and steeps, what does that look like? Sections through that, different options, how that's going to look. That would help me understand the impact of this. As here, you have to kind of guesstimate what the impact might be, and even for someone with trained eyes, there's not enough information here.
All right.
I'm sorry, I feel compelled to say one more thing. But in response to what you just said, some of that is only done at the definitive plan level, because all of that costs a lot of money. So you
This
can't.
is a big change.
I appreciate that, but at some point, an applicant can't be expected to do 7 different iterative plans giving full specifications.
Well, then.
So they need to hear us and comment on it, and then bring back a definitive plan that shows us that they've heard us.
But-
And then we can vote on it.
But in that instance though, Brian, they're bringing back a definitive plan with all the detail that they've just spent the money on, and they may get rejected.
I hear you.
So it seems to me that it would be in their interest to work
We've
towards a
been
yes.
offered a second preliminary, and I think that you've heard the issues, and there's no requirement. I mean, you see all the waivers, but you want something that gives people a good idea of what you're proposing and getting their input. Because that's what we want. We want to know how the neighbors specifically feel. If they simply say we're against it, then we have to determine whether or not we're going to deny it, and leave the applicant to consider other uses of the land. Or we have to decide without neighborhood input what we feel would be satisfactory, and it's always easier to determine that when we know what the neighborhood likes.
Alex, can I just follow up? I'm sorry, Denny, may I follow up?
You go ahead.
Yeah, just on this interim, I think Highland Ave, forget the name of what they called that.
Marina State.
Marina Estates, We did some plans that were back and forth before we had the final plan, and it doesn't have to be fully engineered to get some of this information. You don't have to have the stormwater design, but if you had the engineer say, look, if I come in with a 5% slope versus an 8% or a 3%, at the last 30 feet, last 50 feet, last 100 feet, then it has this impact on the stormwater design, then you can have a dialogue that people can understand, this is why this makes sense to do it this way. It can be diagrammatic, it doesn't have to be fully engineered, but that, in my experience, that is part of that process for any design professional who's working on these things, would be doing this anyway before they get to that final. It's just taking it a step further than what it is now.
All right, Denny?
So, in the spirit of being able to disagree, I went to the neighborhood and I spent an hour walking around sort of looking at the waivers and just trying to possibly imagine like how this could work. And I did see the retaining wall, and I did see the narrow road, and I really, really tried to get my head around it. And I have a lot of empathy because a lot of the neighbors came out and talked to me, and they were sort of grappling with the same things that I was seeing, all of which you listed and we discussed. And, you know, I think a delicate balance was a good way of putting it. If you widen for safety, you know, you may remove so many trees that you hit some water, and paving, you often run into more water problems. You already have water problems in the neighborhood. They sent a report into us. When you get down to Brush Hill and you can't, there's no sight line to the left, it's not safe. We wouldn't, this was like Ned said this at the beginning, if this was a subdivision that came to us today, we would absolutely say no. But we're trying, it seems like we're trying everything to make this work. And when you're up to 6 waivers before we even started the meeting, and then I know 22 is a big number, and I know that includes handicap access and sidewalks you may not need in the end, but we're still somewhere between 6 and 22, and a lot of them are safety related. I find myself, I'm willing to go through the process, but I do think it's very rare that you have this many neighbors who are unanimous and who are grappling with the same sort of things I am, but I'm fine to go through the process, but I think it's a tricky one.
Alex,
It's very hard to.
sorry, just if you don't mind, 1 minute primer on our responsibility relative to the subdivision law from the legal point of view. Like,
Well, when they come up with a definitive plan, they either meet all our rules and regulations, or they don't. And if they don't meet all the requirements in our rules and regulations, they're going to have to request waivers. And the board is then going to have to determine in good faith whether or not the waivers should be granted as being in the public interest and reasonable. We're obliged to look at it objectively and come to a thoughtful decision. And obviously, public input is going to have a effect on that decision, because that's why we have public hearings.
I recall that there have been some subdivisions that have been denied, and they've been challenged in court in the planning board, and they've been reversed.
That's right.
And so, can you just kind of give us a little bit of background
Well,
on a couple
I mean,
of
there's
those?
a requirement for a 50-foot right-of-way. We've only got 40 feet here. So on its face, if we were starting sort of from the beginning and had no history of right-of-way widths, we could deny it with some ease. But given the fact that there are plenty of 40-foot rights-of-way in town, and given the fact that we I think most recently allowed a less than 50-foot right-of-way for Mary Webster Drive, our past performance, we would have to come up with a good, solid reason why we think that a 50-foot right-of-way here would be required.
So is
And
precedent,
that in the past of what we did, it was all different.
so is precedent important? Because I ask this because I know over at Wentworth Farm, I believe it is, there were many, many, many waivers granted. And I think in my 2.5 years on this board, there are subdivisions, I can think of, I can't think of one that didn't have waivers granted. Am I right?
But
So is precedent important that way?
precedent's important. Wentworth Farm was a cluster, so
Okay.
it was not a conventional subdivision.
Okay.
So we have a little cover there. But what we've done in the past certainly can be held against us.
May I
Thank
make
you.
a comment?
Yes.
So I believe in private property rights. I think Ms. Turner has every right to explore development of her property. But when we did the site walk, I had my 9-year-old son with me, if you recall. And I mean, the sight lines to the left, coming down Upper Road to the left, that is incredibly hazardous. And to have this little boy trying to cross over Brush Hill to then cross back to Lower, I couldn't envision how there could be any safe pedestrian activity in this area, how there could be safe access out of Upper Road to the left or to the right, frankly. And I'm very, very troubled with the idea of water, especially given some of our recent experience. We can see how this could be really challenging. I hear what you say, Alex and Brian. I mean, I think we have to go through the process, but I just wanted to lay out for the applicant, those are very serious concerns, and frankly, I'm struggling to see how they'll be resolved, but I look forward to see what you put forward, particularly on the sightline issue. I find that to be a critical path issue that needs to be rectified.
Is the sightline one of the, just out of curiosity?
90-degree angle.
I don't think it's in the rules and regs.
Requires a 90-degree angle?
It requires a 90-degree angle, but sightlines are something else. Interesting question. Well, we have, yes,
Can I please
ma'am.
speak? Thank you. I'm Lisa Leo. I live at Walcott Road. So my property basically is across the road. I guess it's a road. When I first moved there, I thought it was a driveway. I never envisioned it would someday be an official road with possibly handicap ramps and lights and driveways, and so it is going to be a road, I guess. But my property is really impacted, and I'm trying to give you what you want, which is the input from the neighbor that you need. And from my perspective, my property, it's like that driveway is right across from my house. It's in my bedroom. The lights, every minute somebody comes in and out of that driveway, the lights go into my bedroom. And they go into my house. And that's exactly, you taking that berm down, which is a 5-foot berm. And it's in kind of, I think, in front of the tennis court. And there's trees on top of it. And you're going to level that according to the plan. And that's where the driveway is going to be positioned. And, you know, it's offensive. And I guess there would have to be, you know, street lights of some sort there to indicate, you know, the turn part into the road or the driveway. So I am really impacted in that department. And, you know, if this were ever to be envisioned as to come to fruition as a full subdivision, I would ask that that driveway not be exactly across from my house. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable request, because it could be moved up. And I hate to be, you know, I don't want to offend any of the other neighbors, but I mean, I am totally affected by that. That runs, you know, it's, the houses are like basically lined up along my property. So.
Well, this is something that we've addressed in the past. So knowing about it is always useful.
What do you mean? What's so
You're
funny?
telling us what the issue is, that you have an issue with the driveway.
Yeah.
That's what we
You're
like to,
asking.
like to hear.
Okay, great. I know you think it's very funny.
I don't
but
think it's funny.
It's very upsetting to me
I don't think-
because it really does impact my property value.
Of course
If I
it
were
does.
to have a driveway directly, in and out, just the lights constantly in and out of my driveway.
I think
I'm
he's
not,
actually trying to thank you because none of us thought of it. I walked up and down that road. I didn't even think of that, but you thought of it because you live in that neighborhood and you looked at the plan and said,
I
my
sit
bedroom.
in my backyard all for the past 2 months, knowing that this is going to happen, and saying, oh my God, that's going to be awful to be looking at those headlights in and out, all hours of the day and night. And, I just look at myself and I say, what do? I'm going to have to put a giant fence up, whatever. But I don't, like somebody said, one of my neighbors said to me, you're not going to be able to the fence isn't going to, we're on the second floor, this fence isn't going to work. But, there are ways to put the driveway, I guess, somewhere else. That would be my only input. And also, second thing, is respectfully, Mr. Corcoran, the brush that he was referring to are the trees. So they're giant 100-year-old trees. That's the brush he's referring to, which is basically take all the brush out of the side and clear it out. And one other thing, this is my third point, is the driveway, if it stays in its position, is basically an old retaining wall. That's where the driveway is positioned, against my old 100-year-old retaining wall, which is crumbling. And I'm not fixing it because I don't need to, and I haven't had to, but that's where the driveway was positioned. So the shoulder that he was referring to would be really right there on the retaining wall.
well, I would say that,
And it's high. It's a high retaining wall.
I would say that people, having heard what you say, and I wasn't laughing about your situation because
Depressing.
it's not a good situation. But people listening, that's an issue. They should, we're going to have another preliminary plan, and we've got a few things to do tonight still. I think that they should put them in writing if they have issues and send them to Mr. Clark, and he will distribute them and make sure Mr. Corcoran gets them also. If you have specific issues that you'd like to see addressed, let us know what they are. And we're going to have a second preliminary plan, and we're going to do this all over again. So,
Turning it into a road where all the trees are kind of gone.
We don't want all the trees to go.
It's a sad situation.
We don't want that to
It's an
happen.
old neighborhood. It has it's our little neighborhood of 13 homes that has a certain character to it, just like, Indian Cliffs or wherever, or, Milton Hill. They all have little character. And this is older homes with little bigger lots and old trees and not big, giant offensive lighting, and it's old, and we're not opposed to development because we have been dealing with Curry College, who are great neighbors, and we've gotten along wonderfully with them, and we have a very respectful mutual relationship with them now. And it was with a lot of effort and some back and forth, but where I don't think the neighbors here, and I think I'm getting that view from you, that they're very against any development in the neighborhood, but I don't think that that's really the 13 neighbors that you're dealing with. I think
we do look for input, but we really do have to, we're going to do this again. In the meantime, consider the specifics and let us know if you would like to do so, because we'd be happy to hear from you. And thanks for phase one.
May we continue this to
Well, you can, but of course, yeah, let's, when do you want?
rather than have to re-advertise?
Well, we do, right. Continued until when?
September 28th?
Okay. at,
Do you need a motion?
yeah,
So moved.
Second.
all in
Time.
favor.
Time?
Time at 8:15. What time is we're doing the, okay, we're doing the zoning, 8:15. 8:15.
You're going to do the zoning on
All right,
the 14th or the 28th?
7:15. We've got the motion, the 28th at 7:15. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so continued.
Before we move on, may I ask for a report from Mr. Cohen, either through you or through a building inspector or whomever, on when those fire safety provisions of his project will be in place? The pavers, the and the hydrant hooked up? Because it doesn't appear that either of those have taken place.
Thank
and our
you. Thank you.
approval was a year ago. And our construction season is almost ending, so I would like an update, please.
Huh? No, you can't check that.
I will
Let's send
ask Mr. Prondak.
the team back.
Thank
and then
you.
All right, now,
Figure it out. We, you know.
we've got, I think we're going to do 333 Brush Hill Road. Continued hearing. Everyone saw the letter I sent out. What we are hoping for is a survey, so we'll know exactly the lay of the land. And then we can do a proper landscaping plan. And tonight, I would like for the board to make it absolutely clear that this planting plan is unacceptable. And it does not comply with our requirements, and it does not meet the requirements, and what?
I'm grimacing because I don't know if I have that plan. Can we get it on the screen?
I don't know that we can.
Bill,
You need
can
to-
we get that?
One of the challenges with the plan is that it's not, we don't even know if the houses are in the right place.
Well,
It's not surveyed.
The
I
house
mean,
is-
it's conceptual.
It's not satisfactory, right?
okay, so,
All right.
Based on the.
But I just want to make it absolutely, I want the developer to know
Oh, this
that
place.
we do not consider this
Yeah.
plan to be a part of the approved site plan, and that acting pursuant to this is not, is not,
I can't really read that up there, though. Do we want to say what we require in a updated or
we've asked for a survey. Once we have a survey of the site, we want a landscape architect to do some landscaping on it. And they can use this as, once you know where the contours are, once you know exactly where you're going to put these things, trees, then they can use that concept if that's a good concept. But it's just a concept right now.
So may I make a request for additional information from the landscape architect at this time, then?
We don't have the landscape architect.
Well, this plan was prepared by a landscape architect, but if we get a new landscape plan, eventually, I understand it's eventually, but one of the things that could be helpful is, and I've seen this done by other landscape architects, is that they will prepare a sheet which provides a photograph of each of these species, so that we can have an understanding of what they look like. And it's really we being a collective we, because of what happened here and how much was removed. I think the visual would be very helpful in understanding this. And then also, I mean, some of the calipers, 4.5-inch calipers, the largest that's noted here. I'd like to hear about what it would take to get larger caliper trees. What can be had locally, how big can they be had? Because I think they should be the largest.
Frankly,
Yeah.
what's in Pulte?
So, so I would just say, like, we may as well give that bit of input. And then thirdly, for me anyway, is because of the significance and the topographic changes here, is a couple of site sections which shows the heights of these trees sort of as they're installed and then projected in 5 years what heights they might be. Because, I mean, really, this is like mitigation to me.
So, going back to your original question, Alex, I think for me, this plan is unsatisfactory because it's not based on a survey. I think the board should suggest that the applicant, this is not accepted as a modification to his site plan approval and special permit, and therefore he needs to follow the existing approval, which we're working to modify. And for the benefit of Mr. Prondak, I'd like to say that I don't think he can follow the existing site plan approval and special permit, because I don't think the plan was accurate.
We said it wasn't. What we've said is that we want a new plan.
I understand.
We want a plan. We want a plan, and the first thing we want is we want a survey of the site, so we know what trees remain, where the edge of disturbance is. We want to know what the site looks like, and then the landscape architect can get to work. But until we have that survey, we've got a problem, because this, sort of has edge of forest. You don't know if that's an edge of forest or if that's a mud pile.
And then this is probably unrealistic, but I'd be interested in knowing, since the town farm has not closed to my knowledge. So I would be interested in knowing if there is any stock that needs to be removed as a result of Pulte that the town still owns, mature trees that could be reasonably removed. It may, as I said, it might be unreasonable because I don't know if we can get a truck in there. But if there is, there are ways to get any of the trees that need to come out for Pulte and move them over here.
Well, there are
The application.
46 to 60 trees right along Unquity Road, which
I think
are,
there might be, exactly.
Those are too large to move.
all right.
You understand my question.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what my question is?
Those trees.
I know we
can't move 40
And
caliber
you're right.
trees, but
Yes,
maybe
there-
we can move 18 caliber
Yes.
trees.
In any event, I would,
Definitely 12.
Definitely
I know
12.
what
I
this
want the developer
You can
to
do
know
12.
that this is not acceptable.
We need to take a vote on that, or?
I want to take a vote on it.
I move that this plan is not acceptable as a site, as a planting plan or landscape plan for the 333 Brush Hill Road application.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
In that interim order we sent out, we specified how they're going to get there. I mean, we want this completed. And the way to do it is to survey the site, and then the landscape person goes to work. I mean, that's the only way you can do it. You can't do it any other way. And if the developer thinks you can, the developer is wrong. And in any event, would not be in compliance with our site plan approval or our interim order. Hello, David, what are you doing here?
Hi, just wanted to hear what you guys were talking about tonight.
Anything to report?
I'm intrigued to hear about this plan because my client, just for the record, my name is David Udy. I represent the Mansions at Brush Hill Condominium Trust. We have not received a copy of this plan. Could someone enlighten me as to the date?
This is the November 16th plan.
Oh, that's from
Right.
2016? Okay.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
The only comments that I would like to make, and this is based upon what my client has told me, is that the developer continues to build out the units on site, continues to have heavy equipment on site. I read your interim order, which I greatly, and my client greatly appreciated. Just want to quote a couple of provisions of the order. You know, we were here several weeks ago when this was discussed, and your order was issued in early August. You note in your interim order on page 2, there's a significant problem needing to be, the drainage system is not currently functioning. The lack of an effective functioning drainage system has caused serious stormwater runoff effects on many houses downslope from the development. You guys heard from a number of people who were affected. You say this is a significant problem needing to be addressed promptly. There is an immediate need for an engineer to review the drainage provisions in light of existing conditions. In the last page of your report, you said the building commissioner's request to report to the board regarding compliance with this interim condition, and that failure of the developer to comply with these requirements will constitute a material breach of the site plan approval. My first question is, has there been any report from the building commissioner that anything that you required in
The
this?
building commissioner
order has been
asked
done?
me what the timeline was,
Okay.
and I said that there was no timeline in the order.
So there are words about doing things promptly and immediately because of their concerns with, at least with the respect to drainage. And this is just my opinion and my experience with this matter. Unless this developer is told to stop building his units, he doesn't do anything. He will keep building his units. That is his sole focus. He has not done anything, as far as I understand, to lift a finger to address any issue in your interim order. And the only thing he listens to is when Joe Prondak says to him, stop working. And even when Joe Prondak does that, he doesn't stop working. So respectfully, he's still working, he's building out units, and as far as I know, what I'll represent to this board, just what I know, he hasn't done anything to address anything that you guys told him to do.
Apparently, he's marketing the units.
Yeah, he is. Marketing.
Does he have a broker?
Yeah, I believe he does, Peter Kelly.
I think the broker needs to be kept up to speed with what's happening.
Well, buyer beware, if they don't have an occupancy permit, they can't live there. Right, exactly. So,
Sorry guys, the units are not brokered yet.
There's no broker?
There is no broker.
I've seen ads.
The drainage is working, the engineer is doing a report at the moment. He was out of town, he's back on Monday.
Do you want us to speak
Yeah,
into
come
the
and
microphone?
introduce yourself to,
I am Larry, I'm representing Mr. McKenna tonight. And
Larry,
no-
your last name, I'm sorry.
Larry Nevin. Yeah, I'm the contractor up there. So, the units are not brokered. There is no broker on ready. There's nothing going on at that at the moment. I think he's going to keep in the units.
and you say the drainage is about,
The drainage is done. The drainage is finished, and
is the roadway paved?
no, it's been lined up to be paved on not next week, the week after next.
But you can't turn the drainage on until you pave the road.
Well, it's working. It's been already, the report has been done, but the engineer is out of town and he's not back until next week to give that report.
In my experience, this is the typical experience with this developer. Your report says clearly, the planning board shall approve the choice of, among other things, the drainage engineer. Do you guys have any input on who they picked for their drainage engineer and what their qualifications were and what their report's going to say? No, it's all fast and loose, ignoring what you say in your order and kind of rammed home to kind of get this done. There's no attention paid to these details that over and over and again in your original approval and then your interim order couldn't be clearer. And now we're going to get a report from some unknown drainage person who may have a history with this developer, may not, I don't know, and that'll be that.
Well, no, that will be useful, but it wouldn't necessarily satisfy the interim order. But we'll look at that. I don't know how you can use your drainage if you haven't paved the road. Isn't the drainage system filling up with mud?
No. No, it's not.
Do you have a binder course down, is that it?
No, we don't. But it's not filling up. We got silt basins in every manhole.
So it isn't.
Weren't we going to have somebody look at the
Yeah, peer reviewer. So
peer review?
do we have a peer reviewer on board?
We do not. We did have our engineering people go up and look at the drainage, they looked at the sewer, they looked at the water. I believe they're doing water and sewer now.
It's completed.
The sewer, right, they're waiting for chlorination on the drinking water, which plumbing inspector checks on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, yes.
The sewer part gets notified to engineering tomorrow morning because they put it in today. They had a meeting with them this morning. They had another one with them yesterday. The drainage, our engineering department said they have been following it. They have checked it. They did look at the big system. They're waiting to see the road get paved too.
Didn't we want to have a stormwater reviewer, though, since Lisa Eggleston is no longer available?
She is no longer available.
Exactly, which we discussed, right? So we were gonna find someone else.
I have asked John and Chase both for new list of names.
Sometimes John does the review himself and we do not use a peer review.
Correct.
Where could be faster if we use John? Is that why he went out there? Or, I'm just asking, what's the fastest way to get this
I had asked
reviewed?
if they had ever gone and checked it, and I had a meeting with Joe Prundeck, John Thompson, Chris Trudell, and Steve Metalliano from Fire, so that we could review and keep track of the different projects that we had. One of the projects that we had on the table that day was 333 Brush Hill. Who had done what, who's going to do what. And that's when they came back and said, yes, they had checked the system. They had taken and signed off on the large system. I don't know where they are with the rest of it. I do know that they did the sewer yesterday, today. I know they did the water. I know they're waiting for the sign off on it. So I know engineering's been there, talking with them, following what they're
Right.
doing.
Well, you're following up on this. The order, says that we've got to be satisfied through a peer review that the system is functioning, and whether or not John Thompson is going to satisfy. But what you take home with you is we have said no occupancy permit, no occupancy until we get the landscaping done. And the first step is getting the survey, then we do the landscape, then you'll put it in. And hopefully we can do that this fall.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you want to sell the units, and I think that we want them to get sold, but we wanted the project to be completed.
I did talk to CEC, who is the project engineer. I know they were out there yesterday, I know they were out there today. They were supposed to have an interim report on that drainage system for me to bring to this meeting tonight. They didn't have it. He told me he'd have it for me this afternoon, and never happened.
All right,
Well, even if we got it this afternoon, I don't know if that would have given us.
Well, it's not peer reviewed.
That's what I mean. Even if Mr. Thompson was going to review it, he wouldn't have had time if he got it this afternoon. So my personal perspective is that I think we need to use an outside peer reviewer. I think that the water issues are so significant that it's frankly a liability, I think, for Mr. Thompson to take it on at this point. If he chooses to do so, that's his town management's discussion to have, but I would prefer that we have some outside stormwater expert review.
I agree with that. That was my knee-jerk reaction to the same thing, that at this point, I don't want to waste any more time or get too far down, let this get too far out of hand.
I think that we can do that. We're going to, we don't have anyone, we don't unfortunately have a peer reviewer that we can call on to do it. And of course, we need the developer's agreement to pay, because we don't like professionals who don't get paid for their work. And the developer understands the order, and that all this has to be done, because if it doesn't get done, the project doesn't get sold. It's really as simple as that. And what we've required is not if you read it, it's not it's only what we think is reasonable under the circumstances. So, but we'll see what we can do about getting a name of a peer reviewer to take a look at the drainage. It isn't as though it's going to be expensive, because these peer reviews, they go for a couple grand, usually.
Usually, but my question was actually going to be back to Larry. Can you get Pat to agree to pay for the independent peer reviewer of the existing stormwater system.
I will talk to him in the morning.
Talk to him in the morning, give me back that he will pay it, I will find that person, and I will discuss with you at the end of the meeting who, and I think she can do it probably pretty quick.
Okay.
You've seen her work before.
Do we have an update on the trees, the Linda Parso that are leaning over Linda Parso property?
Oh, do you want to read that?
I was gonna ask Lauren to read it.
It's a different trees.
Yeah, it's a different.
Oh, I'm talking about the Linda Parso three trees.
Oh, the 3 trees. Have they been,
Is there any update on that, on the 3-tree Linda Parso?
have they been
Take
flagged?
parts of those trees down.
No, they're not down, because Mr. Hunt is out of town as well, and he's coming back on Monday, and he's taking them down when he gets back.
Okay, but they've been flagged and the arborist agrees they gotta go.
He said yes.
Yeah, he said yes at
We
our last
asked him at the
meeting.
last meeting, he said yes.
Okay. All right, that's Doug Hunt who said that.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay.
and he's taking them down.
And did,
Monday. Monday?
When he's back on Monday, he's going to give us a time.
Okay, we need to let Linda Parso know so she can
It's fine.
put on her helmet.
Alex.
Okay.
Lauren's gonna read that letter into the record.
Read the letter, and then we're going to, hopefully, we want to finish by 10, so we're going to want to, after that letter is read, we're going to move on, I think, unless people have issues.
This is a letter from, in the butter at 366 Truman Parkway, Julie Alley. You've heard from her at the last meeting on this. Hello, April. Hope you are well. I'm writing to you and hope you will share this email with the other board members. Thanks to the planning board members for paying such close attention to the troubles experienced by our family at 366 Truman Parkway, and it appears several others based on testimony at the last meeting. All is a direct result of the many violations of the 333 Brush Hill Road developer's implementation of the site approval he was granted. I appreciate your plans to hire an arborist, a surveyor, and others to review the current state of affairs at 333 Brush Hill Road. I would like to request, please let me know if these can be granted. 1, the arborist take a look at some trees at 366 that may be affected by deforesting effects at 333. A few have fallen, some are slanting, and I am concerned they also may fall. I noticed that a system of tree support is provided when construction is occurring. Can the developer be asked to A, finance that for any trees that may need to be supported to survive, B, to clear the fallen trees, C, replant them as suggested by another member. 2, ask the developer to plant a row of pines on the border of both properties to ensure firming of that ground, again, and provide privacy for both properties, overseen by the arborist. This action can address for me the fence violations that I previously mentioned. 3, ask the developer to build a stone or concrete wall around the fence of both 366 and 333 properties. This retaining wall as such will cover the gaps that he recently attempted to cover with gravel and dirt, but remains open to water overflow and stormwater flooding onto the abutting properties below 333 Brush Hill Road. 4, if any or all of these suggestions are approved, then someone be appointed to follow up on the implementation. I see the condos are now being offered for sale. I am not an attorney, but I'm asking the question, if the condos are sold, will the planning board still have any say on what happens at 333 Brush Hill Road? Thank you for your hard work. Please do send notice of any future meetings. Best, Julie and family.
Okay, I don't think that, we've got a lot of ideas there, but I don't think that discussing them tonight is what we should do. We're going to continue this hearing until the 14th.
Alex, can that email be circulated?
It's in our packet.
Okay.
Handed out to
I can email it out to you as well.
That's fine if it's in the packet.
I
Thanks.
do think we should clarify, though, the last point about whether or not these units are being marketed. They cannot be occupied until an occupancy permit is issued, which will not happen until all of these issues are resolved. So I think it's important for the public to know.
Right, I sent an email out to that effect today.
So with that, I'll make a motion to continue until which date, Alex?
The 14th?
The 14th?
8:15.
Oh.
8:15?
We're going to do the public hearing for what?
We have a
At 7:15?
2.
Which one?
Do we need to see
We have
if
a
there's
public
members
hearing
of the
before
public here?
75 Adams Street and a public hearing for zoning.
Did anyone from the
What?
public want to speak on this?
We're going to do a site plan review
I
for.
guess we can do
There's-
that.
there's a
but-
woman here waiting.
But we really do want to get to Pulte tonight.
We can do it. She'll be quick.
I just have one brief question.
She's here.
Sorry.
I'm Linda Meach, 188 Beacon Street, and I do have a question. When we were last here, when they started the development, we had an issue with the developer persistently trying to break through to Beacon Street, and we came here, and you did solve that. You also promised at that time, gave us great hope, that you were going to take care of all the trees, and watch what could be saved, and protect those that were near construction. And we went home with a good feeling. But then there was clear cutting. And I think when I saw on TV the last meeting, it was said that the developer got permission for the clear cutting. I think it was from Mr. Clark, I'm not sure, but I would like to know why that was changed. Why clear cutting took the place of careful protection of the trees that were there. Can someone answer that, please?
Well, I think that this is...
It's water under the bridge, I understand
This is an
that.
issue, but I think that we will defer the answer
I
to
would
the
like
next
to-
meeting.
I think
And we'll ask for a report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
I appreciate that. Thank you very
okay.
much.
So we will continue this to the 14th at what time?
7:15 or 8:15, Bill?
Actually, we have 475 at Adams at 7:15. We've got the public hearing for
What?
the zoning articles.
What's
It's probably
475 Adams?
Conley, the building across the street from Blue Hill
Red
Bank.
House.
Okay, this is,
Red House.
they're going to give us a presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
They're going to do site plan approval, and they're going to try to do the site plan approval concurrent to the zoning board of appeals.
All right, well, we can, I'm not sure that we're going to do the site plan approval on that day, but we'll certainly we'll certainly put it on. I mean, if you're advertising site plan approval, we'll just probably continue it, because I don't think that doing site plan approval until we've discussed what we're talking about is the way to approach it.
They've been here before.
I
They've given
understand
an
that.
overview.
I
They came in
under-
and said that they were
Look,
going to go.
I think that's fine.
in
We're
this
we're
method.
not going to conclude it on the 14th,
That's fine.
but we will open it, because we don't want to waste the advertisement.
That's fine.
Okay. Now,
Hey, one thing on the
what
advertisement.
time are we doing this?
Can we do the advertisement question first? There is no legal requirement to put a site plan approval in the newspaper.
Yeah,
This board has historically done that. How long do you want it, 1 week or 2?
We'll do it for 1 week, but maybe we should do it for the 28th. But no, we'll discuss it. We'll do it for then, and we'll discuss it, and then we'll continue it till the 28th.
This is Adams Street?
Yep.
Have we, just before, I know you want to move on, did we come to a consensus that we're going to be doing certified public notice from now on?
By certified mail?
Certified mail with the applicant paying for it, or we need to take a special process to do that?
You probably need to do that because it's a rules and regs deal, because you're gonna put it into your rules and regs so that, I'm not arguing
So
with
how do we
somebody.
do, I understand.
Could
How
we
do
make a
do that? Do we have
motion?
to put that on the agenda to change our rules and regs? Can
Yep.
we just make the motion?
No,
Rules and regs need
we've
to
gotta-
go onto the agenda.
There's a process.
All right, so can we put that in the process?
Yes.
Thank you.
Does it say that we can't, I think that we can do it by certified mail and ask them to pay for it.
So we can check that, move on.
I think that,
Not put it on the agenda?
Okay, I think that we can, do it. Have them, send it by certified mail, and let's get on to Pulte. Let's,
All right, so
we
this is
continue
8:15 on the
what
14th.
time, what time?
15 on the 14th.
Second.
I'm in
favor. All in favor.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Udi. Thank you, Larry Evans.
Okay.
I made the motion.
I didn't vote for it, but I do support it.
Okay, Pulte.
Good. You guys are all warmed up tonight. Jeez, I think I might want to come to another meeting. God.
Okay, now we have a communication from DCR and a proposed response from Pulte and the town of Milton to DCR. And I mentioned to Mr. Clark that the town of Milton is actually not the applicant, would be the trustees that's the applicant, the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust. And you probably can explain that the town of Milton is implicated, but the DCR should understand how it's implicated, rather than just say it's the town of Milton that's the applicant, I think. So, what you've done is you've taken a number of the DCR comments, and then you've made a proposed response to them, and then you're going to, once you get the planning board sign off, you propose to send this off to DCR to see what they have to say about it. And if DCR is positive about the letter, then the planning board would be asked to amend its special permit to incorporate what has eventually been determined. That's what you want, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
now you're going to, yes, introduce yourself and explain the process as you see it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Mark Mastriani. I'm with Pulte Homes of New England. And with me tonight are some familiar faces. It's Reed Blue of Pulte as well, on the far left. Mike Rosati, who's with Marchand and Associates, who's our civil engineer. And we have a new face tonight, if needed. Matt Merva is with Bowler Engineering, and he's a landscape architect. The previous landscape architect on the project, Chris Huntress, has been out of town for the summer, so he wasn't able to help us at the moment. So Matt is duly qualified and has agreed to work with us on this task. So Alex, as you stated, so we were back before the board for our special permit for Milton Woods earlier this year and last year. Ultimately, we received a special permit from this board for Milton Woods in April. And we all knew that subsequent to the planning board approval, that we had more work to do, and we had to go to DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, for an access permit in order to obtain access for the project off of Unquity Road. The first 250 feet of the project is across land controlled by DCR. So, as you mentioned, the applicant of the application to DCR for the access permit is actually the trustees, the Governor Stoughton trustees, not the town and not Pulte Homes, but we are working together with the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust. We did file the access permit with DCR earlier this year, and we did receive back a very comprehensive comment letter from DCR for our application on the access across the 250-foot parcel. That's really what we're talking about here. It's not wholesale changes to Milton Woods or the approved plans. It's we submitted to DCR for an access permit, and we received comments back on our access. We received, a 20-page, 15-page comment letter. As you mentioned, we did prepare a comprehensive response to all of the comments back to DCR. We feel we've satisfied all of their comments, and we're prepared to respond back to them. But one of our responses and one of their comments involved a plan change to the approved plan, and we thought it would be prudent and in our best interest to submit it to the board and let you know what plan changes we're proposing to make in order to address DCR's comment, so that if DCR accepted it and DCR ended up issuing a permit, we didn't come back to the board and say, oh, we made these changes and here they are. We wanted to work together with you and, prior to submitting to them. So that's really why we submitted, plus the trustees are the applicant as well. So we're all in this, together as a team. So on the screen behind you, I prepared a short little presentation just to give a little bit more background for the board. So if you will, that's the approved entrance rendering. So this is Unquity Road, this is our access, and this is our access drive into the site. This is a rendering that was approved as part of the planning board process. And as you'll see, this includes retaining walls on each side of the road that were previously proposed for the project. DCR's comment that we're before you here tonight is they oppose the walls, and because they're not, they didn't like the look of them, they didn't feel it was natural, they didn't feel it was in the character of Unquity Road and the Blue Hills Preservation, so they've requested us to remove the walls and propose something different. Could you go to the next slide? So we asked our engineer to remove the walls, and what we've proposed here, so what we've done here is remove the walls, we've regraded the slopes on each side of the drive at a 2-to-1 slope, and that's what's represented on this photo. So you'll see that the walls are gone. This is the driveway coming in, and on each side we've gone up 2-to-1 on each side and we've moved the walls. And the impact of that, we thought it would be good to share tonight, is what I've highlighted here in yellow on each side. The total impact of removing the walls is about 4,500 square feet. One side is about 2,800 square feet, the other side is about 1,700 square feet, total 4,500 square feet. And Mike has brought this table over here. Previously, there were 50 trees being removed in this in the prior approval limit of work, and without the walls in this new limit of work, including the yellow, it's 60 trees. So there was a difference of 10 trees that would be removed with the changes without the walls. And so, if you can go to the next slide, Bill. So what we did was to, and that was, can you send that? Yeah. So what we did is we went out to the field. We had our engineer stake the limits of the approved limit of work, and then he staked the limits of the new proposed limit of work, so we could really go out in the field and really get a vision and a feeling of what the impact was. And what we've done here is I've highlighted 12 trees now, and the reason that there's 12 is Mike, for DCR purposes, we were only talking 12-inch caliber trees, and when we were out there, there was a 6-inch and an 8-inch pine in the way, and we just wanted to be as upfront as possible here, so we included that on this list. So there's 12 trees in this area, additionally to be removed with our proposed change. 5 of them are oaks, and 7 of them are pine trees. They range from 6-inch caliper to 20-inch caliper there. And then the rest are really all saplings, and I have some sample pictures to show you too. Can you go to the next, Bill? So in order to mitigate our proposed change, and really to address DCR's comment, which is why we're here. We are proposing to heavily replant the 2-to-1 slope and reforest it with like species that are there today. So when we were out there, we saw a lot of oak and pine, and we also, if you look through the forest too, there's some maple around as well. So what we've done here is, instead of the walls, which are unnatural, we would like to respond back to DCR with this 2-to-1 slope with 62 various trees scattered throughout the slopes of oaks and pines and maples. And we really think this is going to be a much more natural look, really reforest these slopes. And I think this is really going to nail the response to DCR, what they're looking for. I think this is really, you know, what they want. So we'd like to, what we'd really like is for the planning board to give us your general support or comments, so that when we propose this to DCR, and if DCR were to accept it and issue the permit, you know, if you did deem this substantial and we did need to come back to amend the permit, it would be a seamless, you know, approach. And then, so if you go to the last page, what we've tried to do, can you go to the previous one? So what we asked Mr. Merva to do, our landscape architect here, was take the previous rendering and remove the walls and add in various pines and deciduous trees to give us a new look and a more natural look of what the entranceway would look like, and what we're now proposing to address DCR's comments. If you go to one of those pictures, Bill, and just for information, to give everybody a feel. So there's 2 photos in this slideshow, and Matt Merva has more if the board really wanted to dive in. But that's very, very consistent of what you'd find out there. There's very minimal low understory. There's tons of saplings, which is what you see there. And then every once in a while, you'll see a mature oak or a mature pine tree. Yeah, and if you'll see, if you can see, so there's a stake here which is orange, and there's a stake here which is pink. And what we did was, you know, that's where Mr. Rosati, he staked the old limit of work and the new proposed limit of work. And you can see it's about, you know, it varies, but it's, you know, 8 feet wide or 10 feet wide or 12 feet wide. And it's really, this is what we're talking about for the additional disturbance. And, you know, in our mind, you know, it's pretty, you know, we think it's pretty reasonable, our solution and our response to DCR. And that's why we're here tonight. Mr. Chairman would like to discuss that with the board.
Okay.
I have some comments.
Why don't I've got some comments. Who else has comments? Cheryl has comments. Danny has comments. Any comments? Brian has comments. Okay. Why don't we? Who wants? Cheryl, give us your comments.
All right. Generally, I like not having the walls, and I like the way you've tried to minimize what it would take in terms of new disturbance. I do wonder whether there's going to be more trees impacted, however, because we know from the way construction sites are that, like, for example, if I'm looking at this plan, Bill, can we get this plan up?
Mm-hmm. That's sheet 2 on that.
Yeah, maybe it's just easier if I go up here and point where, you know, like this tree, for example, and if
Right.
that's a 20-inch, is it really like the canopy like that size? And if it is it really going to survive when that's the line? You know, and are all of these sort of in this zone here? And then here, where there's that contour and you've added 2 in between, so is this really, like, this earth through here going to impact, you know, these trees along that line? So we've seen this before, we've seen trees die, we've had it on our agenda, looking at this. So I'd rather err on saying that these are risky, these are at risk, we're not sure, and say how many more might be at risk. So that's one comment of mine. The other is the caliper of tree. 1.5 inch or 2.5 inch, that's awfully, those are like saplings, right?
It's like undestroyed.
And really, I think it might be better if we're trying to have it kind of replace the forest, is to have different calipers. They're not all the same. So you'd have some, well, first of all, I think that's too small as a baseline. But then, not have everything be 4 or 6 or whatever. Have it be a mix, so it kind of will grow in differently. And then, I'll trust the landscape architect in terms of the species and, continuity of that. And then just one other thing, on looking at DCR's comments, they also mentioned the fence. And I see you still have the fence in. So you didn't address, and it was that same one on this entry rendering. It's where it's, let's see what page this is. It's the second to last page.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just that it said the site driveway rendering, and you've addressed the wall portion of it, the entrance sign, and the non-native plantings and lawns, but the fence part. So the fence, is there something where that can be lower? I mean, I know you've got the retention basin there, so you need something. And you've got it on the left side. So I guess what maybe the landscape architect, if you could comment on how high, because it looks high in the rendering. Does it have to be that high? Is this really the design of it?
Fence. The entry fencing is a split rail fence. On the right side of the entry, it does not need to be there for the pond. The ponds do not need fencing.
Okay.
It was a balancing act, because on the left side, we had spent some time dealing with this board on the kind of the kid corral. And so, we wanted to go back to DCR and remove the walls and remove the permanent Milton Wood sign and remove those things. But we were holding on to the corral over there because it was something that we worked with this board on.
Well, I definitely want to keep the space for the school children potentially to have a safe spot.
So
Just
we
wondering
carried the fence
height.
on the other side.
The
So the height
renderings
is it's not, it's
like
a standard split rail fence, and maybe it's just not pictured perfectly, but it's a standard split rail fence. It's not intended to be of any certain height.
Well, I guess that it just looks a little out of place in the rendering. And maybe it's just because it's the height of it or the extent of it. Anyway, so that was my last comment, Alex, is on the fence.
Okay. Danny, why don't you pick up where Cheryl left off?
I just put together a couple photos of some roadways in the Blue Hills. They show, I'm sure a lot of what you've been seeing, varied trees, thick density of trees. So, yeah, if you could start at the top, we'll just go down. So that's like a typical roadway that you'd find in the Blue Hills. You can see oak, pine, maple. You can go ahead, Phil. It's just another typical roadway. And then the next one, I went out, I was trying to find it. I saw some stakes and stuff. Am I in the rough area?
Yeah, you are. Yep, those stakes are, one of the stakes is the center line of the roadway.
Yeah, so it's pretty densely packed right now, but you see the oak and the pine, and I'm sure there's maple in there. This is just a kind of what the road in general looks like. It's just green, Blue Hills for quite a while. And you can go to the next one. And this is just a stone wall. I think it's even, well, it's on think it's on Governor Stoughton Lane. So these are the typical, and I just pulled that out because, you know, for the Blue Hills, the history of the Civilian Conservation Corps, there's a big relationship to the Blue Hills. You know, from 1933 to 1937, hundreds of men found employment in the midst of the Great Depression at Camp Blue Hills in Milton. And so this was a huge federal effort. So if you carry on here, I'm not saying they built this wall, but this is kind of what you see around Blue Hills. And this is the idea.
The last one.
Oh, there should be two more. Not sure why. But it's the poultry entry. Sorry. So then it's your document. So this helped me because I went from that densely packed picture to this one. So I know the DCR didn't want the retaining walls, and I can see why, because it's not quite what you typically see. That's more of a manicured look. But the, you know, and comment 8 describes the boulder retaining walls with a 2-to-1 max slope. And I'm not quite sure I understand how widening and resloping is going to solve the problem of taking out those huge retaining walls, but I'm sure you've had engineers look at that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you go from these huge retaining walls to just trees. Are trees going to hold it up? Are trees going to hold up that hill?
Yes. Yeah, trees and matting and appropriate erosion protection. The hill will be stabilized, and that will be our duty to stabilize the hill and make sure it's stabilized. And yeah, the 2-to-1 slope is a workable slope for us.
DCR said it's very steep.
Yeah, because when I looked at it, like if you go back a picture or two, you look at it and they're going to have to pull out a lot of rock and I mean it's big boulders and so forth. Yeah. So,
I mean this is our access. I mean the site is not allowed to have access on Governor Stoughton Lane, so the site must obtain access off of Unquity Road. The area that we have available to us is the picture that you showed, and our proposal is we've already narrowed the roadway down to 20 feet. Where the sidewalk is, there is not a grass strip, thanks to prior workings with this board. And then we remove the wall and we go up at a 2-to-1 slope as fast as reasonable, and try to minimize the disturbance. I don't know if you have something else to say, Mike, but.
So we're trying to achieve a balance here. Obviously with the walls, our footprint of cutting trees is reduced to its minimum. Not liking that look, we're faced with, okay, how do we achieve what we want to achieve and still keep that footprint as close together as possible? So you could go to, we talked about slopes, 2-to-1 slope being a steep slope. Now, a 2-to-1 slope would be probably your maximum slope that you would have if you were trying to grass the slope, if you will. But if you use mulches and understory to stabilize the slope, that 2-to-1 is fine, and that reduces again your width of cutting. If you go to a 3-to-1 slope, that's probably more in tune with something you might mow. So that's really not what the DCR is looking for either here.
Right.
So there's really, and that would increase the footprint of cutting the mature trees. So we didn't propose that for that reason. So we think the 2-to-1 is the appropriate way to skin the cat, if you want to say that. And it also will provide us the opportunity to vegetate the slope so that it will be as lush as some of your photos, maybe not right away, but eventually it will get that way.
Right, if I could just jump in there, Matt Merva from Bowler, landscape architect. The idea really is to create that same condition on those slopes that you're seeing along Unquity Road in some of the photos that you just showed. So the the mix of species that we're using as both kind of the taller canopy trees, and then we've got some smaller shadblow that would be more of the understory trees, so that you are creating kind of a reforested edge along both sides of the roadway going in there. I don't think the rendering is capturing kind of the ultimate look of it. It's really, this is sort of what it's going to look like initially, but as these trees mature, the new trees we're planting, you know, the species we're looking at are going to grow at between 1 foot and 2 feet a year, and they are going to grow at different rates from each other. We've got a variety of 5 different species, so over time it's going to look more naturalistic and less like a cut through the woods there.
And is this depicting the actual slope that we're going to?
The slopes are sort of hidden behind the canopies of those trees, so it's not completely representative. Probably showing you a cross-section of the roadway would be, you know, an easier way for you to see the actual slopes. But essentially, if you look at the slope in the photo along Unquity Road, in one of the photos that you just had up, I mean, that's probably coming up at a 2-to-1 slope off the edge of the road. Yeah, but it's something like what you're seeing here, but maybe a little flatter than that. But essentially, we're recreating this edge along the edges coming into the site.
Why are the trees so small? 1.5 inch caliper is practically nothing.
Well, we're trying to fit many of them in there, and we.
But they're
we
gonna
wanna
grow.
provide- Absolutely, but we're trying to provide kind of layers of different species and give them
But
space.
these are your primary shade trees. Your shade trees are the smallest caliber of all. Any particular reason for that? I mean, along the street, you have these great big trees, but they turn out to be not great big trees, just little trees.
So I could add something else to that. I'm sure Matt could elaborate a little bit more, but typically when we replant trees, I know there was some discussion here about having a larger caliber tree, and typically when we plant trees, we have a higher success rate with trees that are 1.5 to 2.5 inches, maybe even 3.5 inches. You start to get replanting plants with a bigger caliber, and the success rate for the replanting of those plants diminishes quite rapidly. So we want to be able to have a healthy tree so that we can feel comfortable that it's going to last 20 or 30 years versus something that might be forced in there and end up not taking.
Right, and we are putting them on a slope, so the smaller the root ball is at the time that we're putting them in, the easier we're going to be able to plant that tree and have it take within that slope and ensure the success of it. So they're going to grow. They're going to grow quickly. We're talking, 13 to 24 inches a year for most of the species that we're talking about height-wise, and the corresponding caliper is going to grow at a good clip as well. So. Day one, they are going to be smaller, but they are going to grow in and create that thickened forest edge that we're talking about.
And I noticed that in comment 1, they were talking about 43 trees at 12 inches, and the new plan is talking about removing 60. Is that 60 at 12 inches wide? Are you, because we're looking at more than 60 trees to just take out, just to get in 10 feet, I'm guessing you mean 60 feet at some significant weight with 60 trees?
Yeah, the 60 trees is a number of trees that is within the whole DCR limit of work. Is that what you're asking?
Is that
Yeah.
right?
Is that just 12-inch
45
caliper,
12-inch
though?
caliper and
So
above,
there's,
yeah.
what she's saying, there's more trees than 60 that are less than 12-inch in caliper, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure I was reading that right. I noticed that in comment 2, DCR was talking about putting the Milton Woods sign into the stonework, having an engraved granite panel. Is that still?
Yeah, in the response to DCR, we removed the permanent Milton Woods sign. Yeah.
Signs are going to have to be, according to the special permit, you're going to have to go to the sign review committee before you have anything
Absolutely.
that you can put up. And you've got to get, sign review committee and DCR both have to agree on the any signs that you have in that area.
Because your response is talking about a temporary community marketing sign?
Right. Yeah, so the permanent Milton Woods sign we've removed from the plans, or we're proposing to remove from the plans, but the temporary Milton Woods community sales sign is still part of the DCR application. It was part of our approved planning board plans. It's referenced
Except
in
it
the...
is subject
Yeah,
to the
exactly.
sign review
That's
committee.
right.
In other words, what you show on your plan
Yep.
hasn't been approved.
Sure, absolutely. So it was part of the plan, and we're aware that we have to go to the design
Right.
review committee to
You
get...
might as well tell the DCR that.
Okay, I mean, we can tell them that, sure.
I mean, just because your temporary sign as provided in the plan, we had a pretty good idea that the sign review committee wasn't going to go for it. I think, didn't we? I think we did. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is DCR property, so, and it is, Blue Hills property, so the idea of a marketing sign there doesn't really fit. I mean, if you go anywhere in the Blue Hills, there aren't any marketing signs. I mean, it's an access to a development, so you could put development entry signs at the development, at the actual development, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's very important for the project to have a Pulte marketing sales sign at Unquity, because the uniqueness of the site is you're off of Unquity, there's 250 feet of DCR property, and then before you even get to our homes, and there's elevation, and there's a turn. So anybody driving along Unquity Road will have no idea what's being built back there. But I did watch the tape of the planning board meeting 2 weeks ago, and I saw that you guys discussed the sign. So, I did, just in preparation for this discussion, I did drive out along Unquity, and, I took pictures of other signs along Unquity. The base camp has a sign, and Blue Hills has a sign, and the skating rink has a sign. The swim team tryouts have a sign. Cape Sayre has a sign. The Mass State Police has a sign, all within about a mile of our entrance. So I'm hoping that the design review committee will see our wooden Milton Woods sign in a very harmonious and consistent fashion with these other signs that are right there. Whether the design needs to be tweaked or not, we're certainly open to that. But having a sign is just imperative for the project. So hopefully they'll allow us to have a sign.
All right.
It looks
Well,
like-
I just point out that you're going to need approval. I mean, that's what the permit says. You know what the permit says. Brian, you have some?
Very brief. I share Cheryl's sentiment that some of these trees on the edge here are probably in trouble. And I question we've been hearing a lot about it at another property in town of the deforestation in front of other trees and how that weakens the trees behind them. So especially out towards the roadway here, where you have a huge cluster of trees, T12, T20s, right along the limit of work, where the limit of the work starts to change. Just keeping in mind that, if we're gonna lose any of those trees, if it puts any others at risk, if there's anything we can do with fertilizer, excessive watering, whatever we can do to try to help those trees along, because certainly we've seen a major problem with, once you pick at the front of the grove, the rest of the growth goes pretty quickly.
Protection of trees along there is really going to be obviously critical, right?
So one of the things we proposed to the DCR relative to that issue is that when the time comes, if we get our approval, to rotate the trees, that we would stake, obviously, the limit of work again, so that, and then have someone like Matt's caliber or somebody from the DCR with him to, before we cut anything, before we do any actual physical work, to evaluate the line and how it is in proximity to these trees, and then come up with, if we need to, a game plan to not affect them.
Yep. And that was gonna be my next point, is just, I'm gonna be the only person at the table that says this, but I liked the walls. I thought the walls looked nice. I thought they gave a nice presence, but I understand the reason with DCR and Blue Hills that it's probably not appropriate here. So that being said, it creates an obvious conflict in DCR's comments, because you're ending up, one of their other comments is you're impacting a lot of trees. Well, now we're impacting more trees. So it creates a conflict along the edge to what you were just saying. I would wonder if there's any way to do small stone retaining walls around the edges of these trees to protect some of them, sort of like what we did over the St. Pius Estate, which is now Woodmere, where you have actual retaining walls around the base of the trees where the site was raised up to protect those large specimens. So to the extent that that could be done, that would be very much appreciated. I think that would help a lot with the sensitivity to the existing natural canopy.
And that's some of the things that we kind of discussed amongst ourselves, and as part of this slope that we're gonna make. If you go out there today, you'll see undulations of stones. We were thinking also of doing similar, so something along those lines might be a practical way to do exactly what you're saying. It might not look like a wall, it might look, but it'll do the same type of thing.
Retain the area.
Right, and realistically, as long as we kind of stay away from the root ball, and depending on the size of the tree, that could be 5, 10, even 15 feet from the actual side of the tree. If we can accomplish that, we can save that tree and make sure we don't affect it.
Yeah. Okay. So that would be great.
I like the new design better. I think it looks more natural. But I wonder if this replanting is going to have any impact on the sight lines. As you know, I was very concerned about cyclists in this area, and I'm just curious if
We've
thought
stayed
about it.
out of the sight line triangle.
Perfect.
Completely. Absolutely.
I'm done.
Okay, well,
That's more too.
okay, go ahead, Denny.
Under response 8, I'm glad to see that there's a thorough review and monitoring schedule. I think it would be good to spell out if there is an action plan, if stability or erosion occurs. We've seen at other sites a lot of issues with that. So it's nice somebody's going to be monitoring it, but if there's a problem, what's going to happen is my question. If that could be just spelled out in here. Yeah. And if it could just be spelled out, just a quick sentence in the document so that.
So just so you know, as part of the approval and a part of our submission to the town, we, and to meet with EPA standards, we need to submit what they call a SWIP for the site, which addresses not only what we're doing with our construction materials, but most of it involves erosion control and sediment control. So in that SWIP, we've laid out the ground rules for stabilization. We conduct inspections every week and after significant rainstorms, so that if we see the potential for erosion or we see erosion occurring, we end up coming up with an action plan to fix it and to address whatever's happening, so that we do not have soil flowing down into the street and into the wetlands. That's one of the main goals of why we have the SWIP that we've come up with for our project. So we can still spell that out. Some of the stuff might overlap, but that's okay.
I would appreciate it. If you're going to be doing it anyway, it would be good to just have it in there. It'll help us with future projects if we can have the language. Also, in addition to protective fencing, the root systems, especially because we're, like you said, planting a lot of these on a slope, the root systems would need to be covered, and, you know, we don't want to see piles of dirt from construction, you know, smothering the roots. So I just wanted to see if you could add a little bit more detail there. On other construction sites, we've also seen construction vehicles going within the drip line. So I know that's probably what the fencing is for, but any protections you could sort of outline in there would put us at ease.
Okay, let me interrupt.
Okay.
10 o'clock, we're going to entertain a motion to go past our usual adjournment time. And if it succeeds, you get to stay, and if it doesn't, you'll have to go.
So moved. Second.
Okay, you can stay, and I'm in favor also. So it's unanimous. The other thing, Lauren, would you go and make sure that the outside door is open? Because in a public meeting, the meeting has to be accessible at all times to the public. And if all the doors are locked, then the public isn't. So, continue.
I have two more tiny things, but just that the DCR did mention that grass is not great at maintaining slopes, and I see them in the plans, but I don't know if they're still in the plans, and I worry in 5 years when everything's sold about the maintenance of the grass, so I was just wondering where you were at as far as grass goes.
So we've specified a slope restoration mix, so it's not just a typical lawn seeding that we're putting on those slopes, and that would be stabilized as well. And then the contractor would be responsible for making sure by the end of their guarantee period that we do have an established mix on that slope. So we're not, it's going to be established as grass. It'll have to be watered in, and it'll have to work properly, but we don't see any issue with that getting established because we're going to use the right seed mix for that shady sloped area.
And is the homeowners association going to maintain it after you leave, or how is that going to be maintained?
So the right-of-way of the road will eventually be turned over to the town. But the area above the right-of-way will be common area of the homeowners association. That would be maintained by the HOA. But I don't see any maintenance, really, responsibilities of this naturalized wooded area in the future.
It's confusing to me.
Well,
that the
I mean,
homeowners
replacement
association
of trees as they die, because you've seen that slope, that 2-for-1 slope down the road from you, which is, got 2 rhododendrons and a deceased shrub pine on and a lot of wood chips.
A beauty.
So in any event, there is going to be, there is a potential significant expense if this stuff isn't watered and tended, it dying out and having to be replaced. DCR says you should be on the hook for 5 years. That's what DCR says.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think, is there a way that that I don't really think we necessarily want the town or a homeowners association to have to maintain DCR land. It's DCR access. It's not.
Right, but someone has to maintain it.
The road, whether it's on town property or DCR, is going to be maintained by the town once it's turned over to the town.
Maintain the drainage basin.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the other question I had. So have we verified that that's the actual case? That the town is going to be?
Well, I mean, if the town accepts the road and agrees, but the town meeting has got to agree. In the meantime, the HOA will be doing the maintaining.
Alex, I'd like to just clarify a point here. You know, Matt's telling you that initially we're going to grass the slope with a native seed mix, and that's really the difference here. Is initially we need to stabilize the slope, but as those trees start to grow and the pines start to let their needles down, the grasses are going to eventually turn into root
Forest
mass,
floor.
forest mat, and there will be no need to maintain that grass at all. It'll die off, and then, so we'll get the initial stabilization, and then through the natural process of leaves falling every year, you'll get the forest mat to come and take over. So this picture, I think, does an injustice in saying that this is all grass in here. Initially, yes, but over time, it's not going to be grass anymore. So there really won't be any need to cut or do anything like that in the future.
Unless the stuff dies. 5 years, is that a good time? That's what DCR wants. You didn't, in your response, you didn't jump and say 5 years seems just fine.
What's your build-out period, do you think?
2 to 3 years, based on market conditions, but I think, from start to finish, somewhere in the 2 to 3 range here. 2 to 3 years sounds reasonable.
I checked in the Arbor Day Foundation tree guide, and is that a good place?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. And that said that the Little Leaf London is not native, it comes from Europe, but I just wanted to, I know you're going to be dealing with DCR and they wanted native, so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, we don't have any of those in the current plan.
Okay, okay, so this was.
You say that we have them elsewhere?
Not in the DCR land. Not in the DCR.
Not in the DCR land,
I'm
okay.
sorry, yeah, I thought you meant in the DCR area.
I do, okay, all right, I must have seen it on.
Well, what about including them in the rest of the land? I mean, didn't we want native trees?
All of the street trees we have chosen were from the approved street tree list that was provided to us from this board, so.
And do you have mixed, as you go up the roadway, do you have linden, oak, blah, blah,
So there's
elm?
There are 3 different styles. There's elms, there's maples, and there's the lindens. They're not they don't stagger. There's a group of maples, and there's a group of lindens, and then there's a group of elms.
As street trees?
As street trees. That's the way the landscape architect has designed the project throughout the site.
Okay, I have a few things, little wordsmithing. When you say to minimize tree removal, you're not, in this response number 1, in order to minimize tree removal, you're not minimizing tree removal. You can say you're reducing it, but minimizing it is not what you're doing. I agree with Brian. It seems to me that the DCR, if you had planted trees in front of those walls, rather than just had sort of a big grassed area, you could have had a perfectly good forest area, and they would have not had to grow on a 2-for-1 slope, which seems to me that there are going to be problems with growing trees on a 2-for-1 slope. The DCR thinks it's very steep. Even in good conditions, is what they say. And they wonder how you're going to prevent rutting and all sorts of other stuff. I don't know. I mean, maybe DCR doesn't know what they're talking about, but maybe they do.
I actually agree that it would be nice to see stone walls that are, in keeping with the CCC.
Right, and you have understory and trees, and you don't even see the stone walls, but you have a much flatter, and you have you take down less trees. It's just you really should push back on DCR about this rather than just say, okay, we'll take out the walls. Have them as sort of, I mean, these plateaus would make good planting areas, it seems to me.
Alex, do you still feel that way if boulders and partial walls are worked into it, as Brian suggested? Because I think that's more natural.
Beechwood, they had a lot of big boulders.
Well, that wasn't well executed.
It wasn't well executed, but it was okay. It was okay as far as I was concerned.
But the idea of a retaining wall as a functional element is different than a wall as
a boulder as a
is just
functional element.
More aesthetic, though. It's like, I would say, just if I may, I'm sorry,
Okay,
it's
yeah.
your time, you may grab this, at this point, though. See, the thing that's bothersome really is sort of a straight line here, but I'm hearing that when they're going to go out in the field and they're going to assess it, that this may move around a little bit, and so that is going to make it much more natural than a straight line, just like the wall was kind of more of a straight line. So and I'm very hopeful that you'll execute that in a way that's very mindful of that, bringing the boulders in. So it's not just that 2-to-1 slope, kind of as it looks like in plan here. So, no.
And I think the 2-for-1 slope for years is going to look awful.
What is the slope? You may not know the site. Up the street, the site that we've been referencing, that is the mulch hill.
Right next to the entrance to Harlan Street.
Is that
Harlan Street. On the driveway comes off of Harlan?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's it.
What would you estimate that slope at?
It's probably a little steeper than 2-to-1, but it's in that ballpark.
We're not proposing our slope to look anything like that mulch
Well,
hill.
I'm not suggesting
honestly.
you're proposing, I'm just concerned it might.
Yeah.
Because you can't get the trees. to
Well,
sit.
initially, they're going to be just so small that it's going to, it is going to be troubling. And then in a few years, people will say, as long as it grows and gets tended and watered by Pulte for 5 years, where you say we would agree to a condition which requires us to inventory, map, and tag all proposed trees, it seems to me that this should have been done. You should have. Well,
We've done that.
right, okay, that the trees will be inventoried, mapped, and tagged, not that you'll agree to a condition that it happens. The response two has to do with your sign. I just, as I say, I mentioned that you need approval. They say there's only a single species lining the road in comment 3, which I gather is just wrong.
Right.
But then they go on and say, the driveway rendering noted in 2 above also shows masses of low plantings, shrubs, and ground covers, which should be reviewed by DCR. And then you, in your comment, you say, we've removed the low plantings from the plan. What did you do that for?
We have, because we're now proposing trees, oaks and pines, and we're trying to replicate the forest and not plant a bunch of pretty flowers and shrubs, which we previously were proposing on top of the shelf walls.
Okay, so you're saying that these shrubs are rhododendrons and pachysandra. Shrubs, where you say you've removed it all, you've removed the low plantings. I mean, you
Right.
obviously want an understory because you don't have a forest without an understory. But you might make that clear that, you might make that clear. Does the drainage basin is going to be pretty open? It's just going to be, it is going to be this clearing in the middle of the forest, right? Just right along the road. It doesn't seem to be landscaped except on the very far side.
That's correct, Alex. This basin is
Right,
pretty
it's-
much right along the edge of the road.
Right.
So it's not in the middle of the forest, it's.
What's
It's-
it? Is it just grass, or can you do blueberry bushes in there?
We could plant some shrubs on the top, and if you recall from the, I don't know, some of the drawings we had, basically we've got a kind of a berm built up along the road, so you can't really see directly in. You have to go up over the top, and then you'd be able to see that. So certainly might be effective along the base, the road base of it, to disguise the.
Having something other than grass.
Yeah.
Well, I think that that sounds like a good plan.
We just want to preserve the sight lines, obviously, that's our
Right, but
concern
this
here,
is
too.
way down from your entrance. Well, not way down, but it's pretty far away. So there's this talk of, they don't seem to have read the Conservation Commission's order of conditions for whatever reason. You say the detention basins are to be seeded with native seed mixes, whatever that may be. And then surrounding areas are to be planted with native trees and shrubs. So here you say there are going to be shrubs, so where you say you're going to remove the shrubs, that's a little bit inconsistent. Then, and this is response 4, you say the applicant has agreed with the town of Milton to expect all sediment erosion controls at least once each week in following storm events. But you're going to, how long are you going to do this?
So Alex, we're required to do that up until the whole site is stabilized, and we've asked for a certificate of compliance from the Conservation Commission and the EPA that goes back to the SWIP that I referred to earlier.
Well, when we get to the special permit stage, we're probably going to require that, and we can fix this in the special permit, we're going to require that someone keep an eye on these things.
You mean enforcement afterward? Do you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, this doesn't say how long this is going to take, and obviously when you have a certificate of compliance, you still are going to have to look at your sediment and erosion control. Someone's going to have to do it, and yeah.
So Alex, this is the way it kind of works. We'll build the site. As we're building the site, that's when the most potential for erosion is going to occur. Once the site is stabilized, the maintenance that we're, for the detention basins and the stormwater that we're talking about gets transferred to the homeowners association.
Yep.
And there's a long-term operation and maintenance plan that they're going to need to follow and submit reports to the Conservation Commission after we've gone. So
All right, but we haven't seen that yet.
We have, it's been approved. It was part of the
The long-term
stormwater,
operation is part of what?
it was part of the stormwater management plan that was peer reviewed by Lisa Eggleston and also reviewed by the engineering
The
department.
SWPPP?
No, the stormwater design
it's
is
in
part
that
of the
package I
engineering
gave
of
you.
the project. It was also approved,
Okay,
reviewed by the Conservation Commission.
all right, so they are going to take over. They're going to maintain the DCR land until the, how long, I mean, when you guys leave and all these things begin dying on this 2-for-1 slope, unless you retain the stone walls as you should, who's going to replace them? The homeowners association is going to say they look fine to us, and then the building inspector is going to have to go, and we're going to have to coerce them.
So Alex,
That's the deal.
Alex, the land that the trees are going to be on are going to still be the DCR's land,
Yeah.
so obviously they're going to be concerned about the plantings that we do on their property because they're probably going to have that same opinion, that they're going to be concerned that the trees will last and that what we've done is satisfactory. So once we are done and we've satisfied them, then the maintenance, I believe, of the forest will be just like it is going along Unquity Road for them. They will take it over at that point. The homeowners association is going to maintain the basins and the drainage system from Unquity Road up through our subdivision. This first basin is being maintained by the town.
I'd comment, they say max 2-for-1 slope behind which it itself is a very steep, even under good conditions. I don't see how the ECR in good conscience can go for it, but we'll see. Long-term construction monitoring is what you say in your response to number 8, the last words, as part of the long-term construction monitoring. I just wonder who's going to be doing this long-term construction monitoring. It doesn't say, but when we do a special permit amendment, we will say who's going to do it. Comment 9, they call for a 5-year monitoring, maintenance, and replacement plan, and your response just totally passes over that. It doesn't say anything about it. If it's fine with you, then you should say it's fine.
I don't know, so on my copy here, we said that we would do it. The last paragraph of that response, following the tree removal, site work, and forest revegetation, we will initiate 5-year monitoring program.
Where is this?
The last paragraph in response number 9.
All reports, documents, and if necessary, remedial action plans will be provided to DCR, is what this one says.
The prior sentence, he said.
So you just read that, he's talking about that.
Following the tree removal?
Yes.
Following the tree removal, we will initiate a 5-year monitoring program. But who is we? You're not going to do it.
No, that's a developer obligation. That's a commitment that Pulte is making.
It's a Pulte obligation. Okay.
So you want to change we to Pulte?
Well, I guess that's right, because the town is part of the we that you're talking about here.
But isn't it Pulte that's doing all the responses?
No, it's the town.
The town and, good catch.
Well, no, the town and Pulte.
Oh.
The town and its partner Pulte. It's a 5-year, by the way, it's a 5-year monitoring and maintenance and replacement plan that they want, not just a monitoring plan. And all you talk about is evaluation. You don't talk about the replacement, which they say should be part of it. Runoff for the lots will be directed into the stormwater basins during construction, and that would be include the ones on DCR land. What does DCR say about that?
So Alex, that comment was in response to DCR being concerned that the lots would be draining into the street and then down into eventually down to the bottom of the hill. And so we've tried to address the lots that would be doing that, and there's really only 3 of them that will be doing that,
Right.
or have that potential. So that's why we proposed what we proposed.
Okay, but DCR said, we're concerned that there will be runoff which will find its way into the drain system and detention basins, and you confirm that indeed there will be sediment that goes down into the space.
Not sediment, a runoff. Runoff and sediment are 2 different things. So we will treat the runoff so that there is no sediment going down into the street, down the street. That's part
You
of the
might, where you talk about traffic, response 11, traffic, work hours 9 to 3:30, Monday through Friday on Unquity Road. You've got Hillside Street also, you'd better mention it.
I'm sorry, mention Hillside.
You'd better mention Hillside Street, because that's a MDC road that you're going to need permission to use.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so we were only responding to comments here. We weren't, so.
I understand, but it may be that do they understand that?
It's on the plan. There is a plan that shows the direction of
No,
traffic.
I understand, and there is also text So they really should mention Hillside Street so that we don't have a, when we get to the crunch, we don't have
State police, it turns to Hillside.
a problem.
So if you came in, you're coming in Hillside. Then you get to Unquity.
Okay, they want you to do some stuff about blasting. Long-term monitoring and mitigation about blasting is what they want. And you don't address their comment.
No, we said we'd agree to a post-construction ecological assessment, which they asked for.
I understand, but they asked something over a number of years. Over the long term. Some of these changes are not evident until many years later. So the proponent should be asked to mitigate any advanced ecological impacts well beyond 2 growing seasons. You don't mention how many growing seasons you're willing to commit to. Have you talked to Alan Birkland recently?
Archaeology?
No, not recently, no.
But they say, don't disturb this outcrop. Let's figure out if there is an outcrop. And
Right, so that was their comment, and our response
Right.
back to them was that a full archaeological assessment was done.
Look, someone says they have this outcrop. Let's put it to bed. There is either an outcrop or there isn't one. And Ellen should, you should talk to her and say, is there an outcrop or not? Shouldn't you? Isn't that the easy way to do it?
So Alex, I think we're going down a different path than what we perceive this to be. These are our responses to their initial comments. We're intending to meet with them to discuss these
All right.
comments and our comments with them and give and take or whatever we come up with.
Okay, this is just part of a give and take. This is not this is just here, now what do you think of this? And they're going to come back to you and say, this is what we think. Okay, so that's all I have.
I did have I'm sorry, I had another question. There was a mention of an additional roadway access, and I'm sorry, I don't know where it was in all these materials that we got recently, but I just wanted to know where that was.
Well, no, they commented that there wasn't one.
There's no additional roadway access that we're proposing for this change. No.
But in the development at all, is there an additional roadway access?
Nothing additional than what's been approved and what's been shown on the plan. No, I don't know where that's coming from.
Okay, so what do you want to do, Planning Board of
One
Milton?
last question, and I was wondering at what point, where are we at as far as cutting the check to the town? How many more?
Yeah, so we're not closing on the land until all of the permits are obtained. And so the last permit to be obtained is the DCR access permit. And then we would proceed with the closing. But what I'm hearing possibly is that the board is going to be looking for an amendment to the special permit, so then that would become a pre-closing item as well. So we'll, once all the permits are in hand, then the closing would occur.
So you're waiting for the DCR and you're waiting for the planning board special permit?
Well, we have a planning board special permit.
Okay.
We needed, so let me just step back, because Mike brought up a really good point. So, and Alex has a lot of comments on our response, but we need an access permit from DCR to complete the permitting process. In order to get that permit, they've given us comments. Those comments we're trying to respond to in order to work with them to get their permit for our access across their land. One of the responses is requiring a plan change to our entryway. So we wanted to come to the board to find out if the board was supportive of the change, so that we're in compliance with our special permit. And I thought we were going in that direction, and we had some coordination to work out later, but now I'm really thoroughly confused and not sure I really got the feedback we were. looking for?
I think what would help us is, obviously, what I'm hearing is that the board is not totally on board with elimination of the walls. So when we go to meet with the DCR, even though we have a proposal that eliminates the walls, I'm going to ask them how they feel about doing something in between, where we have walls and maybe some screening of some sort, because I'm getting from the board that you like the walls kind of other than the 2-to-1 slope. If we could have some consensus on that, that would help us immensely with the DCR as far as our negotiations with them.
All right, now, do we have consensus on the walls, or does anyone like that 2-for-1 slope?
DCR really hated the walls. I don't.
I stand by what I said earlier, which is that I think integrating boulders into it, being sensitive about not having it be a line that's very clear, I still think that's an improvement over the walls, which are very clearly a cut through. So I'm still with that opinion.
I mean, what I'm reading is that they did not like the idea of this looking like an entryway to a development. They wanted it to look like, I'm trying to find their language. Natural. They had a kind of I'm sorry, carry on without me for a minute, I'll find it. But basically, I don't know that they liked the fence. They kind of listed, they didn't like a lot of, they didn't want modern stone walls, entrance signs, lawns, fences.
But the walls were really the principal feature of the original entry.
Yeah, so
And
they
if
said
you-
they did not, they wanted to eliminate all elements that detract from what is a century-old historic parkway setting.
Right.
The result should be a post-construction naturalized landscape that replicates existing conditions as closely as possible. They didn't like the modern, I think the modern stone walls, that very manicured subdivision look. But I think if you go to like the old farmer walls that you just see all throughout the world.
That's the difference between a retaining wall, though, and that's what I was talking about. When it's a retaining wall, it's structural versus a wall that's integrated more. And I have to think there's got to be other 2-to-1 slopes out there on that property, so I don't think it's atypical with that property. Which, cutting the stone walls is, it kind of reminds you of if you go through mountains and you see where roadways or it's kind of cut and they cut through the rock. Those walls have, always in my mind, had that kind of effect. So the trade-off, and I think we always thought we were going to see what DCR thought about it. I mean, the trade-off with that was that you were going to remove less trees. But I do think that it's a judgment about, like, if you think about it over time, the walls are always going to be there, whereas the trees will grow in, as they've talked about. So it'll be, in the beginning, it still will look obvious that there was construction there, but over time that'll fill back in. The walls would never have that kind of return to forest. So that's why I still, in terms of feedback to them, that would be my piece
I'll
of it.
support either plan from my consensus standpoint. My issue is going to be making sure that the trees stick, and you've got a 2 to 4 year construction period here between the market, depending on the market, and then you've got a year usually warranty for the last house that you sell. So you're on site for 3 to 4 years anyway. I think as long as we can protect your obligation to make sure that when you leave, that hill is stabilized and it looks like it's going to grow into something other than a mulch hill, I think I would be supportive of. But that's going to be a burden, I think.
I know, but the DCR is going to have as much of a vested interest in making sure that happens as we are.
What did you say?
I said the DCR is going to have
as much.
as much
No,
a
no,
vested
I
interest
agree
as we are, so I'm
we'll take
comfortable
care
with
of
what,
the special permit in this
yeah.
other way.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with what you've proposed.
I'm comfortable deferring to DCR, whatever DCR wants is.
We'll build our permit around it.
So it's basically what you work out with the DCR, right? Is that where we are?
No, I don't like it, but that's okay.
Will you like it at 11 o'clock?
No, I don't, I know, we're going to, we've got a consensus here. And so you're off to the races. When we do the special permit, we are going to put some obligations that you are going to have to do the stuff that DCR suggests that you have to do. And so that's the way it's going to be.
Okay.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.
All in favor? Aye.
I left my house at 6:30 this morning to go to New London.
Right, no, it's okay, it's
On 4 hours
okay.
sleep.
It was,
With no dinner.
no easy
I'm just giving you
solution.
a little bit of context here.
Julia?
I'm leaving at 4:45. Please tell us. I'm leaving at 4:45. Cut it out.
We're done? Oh, good.